Welcome to another slow drifting into the dark. Tonight's story begins in a forest wrapped in fog, where ancient stones hold the memory of warmth, and a single torch burns against the breath of the wind. It carries the scent of moss and wood smoke, the quiet pulse of water in the night, and the hush of footsteps returning home. The shadows here move gently, cross wool and skin and old timber walls, keeping watch while the wind sings its endless song. Let your breath match the night's, let the glow hold you, and if these quiet wanderings bring you comfort, you might consider subscribing, or telling us where and when you're listening from. Now, close your eyes and let the warmth carry you into sleep. The cold earth speaks to my feet through the thin leather of my shoes. I walk slowly. The path winds between the thatched huts, each one breathing smoke into the grey morning air. The smoke rises straight up, then bends with the wind, then disappears into the fog that hangs low over everything. My breath comes out in small white clouds. I watch each one form, then fade. Form, then fade. The dirt beneath my feet is hard with frost. Each step makes a small sound, a soft crunch, a whisper of stone against leather. I like this sound. It tells me I am moving forward, even when the fog makes everything look the same. The huts are dark windows and closed doors. Behind those doors, people sleep under thick woolen blankets. They dream of warm hearths and full bellies. They dream of spring returning to the valley. But I am awake. I have been awake since before the sun tried to rise behind the thick grey clouds. Something called me from my bed of straw and rough-woven cloth. Something pulled me toward the door, toward the cold morning air, toward this path that leads away from the village. My feet know this path. They have walked it many times before, in many different seasons. In summer, when the earth was soft and warm, and flowers grew wild along the edges. In autumn, when the leaves crunched louder than my footsteps, and the air smelled of wood smoke and dying things. Now it is winter, deep winter, the kind that settles into your bones and stays there until you forget what warmth feels like. But I am not cold, not really. There is something warm inside me, something that glows like a coal in my chest, keeping me steady as I walk. The fog grows thicker as I move away from the village. It wraps around my shoulders like a shawl made of grey silk. It touches my face with cool, damp fingers. It makes the world smaller, quieter, more mine. I can barely see the path now, but my feet remember. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. The rhythm is like breathing, like the slow beating of my heart, like the sound of water dripping somewhere in the distance. The sound grows stronger as I walk. Drip, drip, drip. It echoes off invisible stone walls, bounces through the fog, and finds my ears like a whispered secret. Water. There is water ahead. My steps quicken, but only a little. I do not want to disturb the quiet. I do not want to break the spell that the fog has woven round me. I am a ghost walking through a ghost world, and that is how it should be. The path curves to the right, then left, then right again. It follows the shape of the hill that rises beside me, though I can barely see the hill through the grey air. I can feel it there, solid and ancient, covered with bare trees that scratch at the sky with their thin black fingers. The dripping sound grows louder, closer. My heart beats a little faster, but not with fear, with anticipation, with the knowledge that I am almost there, almost to the place I have been seeking without knowing I was seeking it. The fog begins to thin, not all at once, but gradually, like a curtain being pulled aside one small section at a time. I can see more of the path now. It is made of flat stones, worn smooth by years of rain and snow, and the feet of people like me. People who walked this way when they needed to find something they could not name. The stones are slippery with frost and moisture from the fog. I step carefully, placing each foot with deliberate care. I do not want to fall. I do not want to make noise. I want to arrive at my destination as quietly as I have been walking, like a thought rather than a person. The dripping sound is very close now. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off stones I cannot see, bouncing through air, that tastes of metal and ice and something else, something green and alive and patient. Then I see it, the spring. It rises from a crack in the rock face that towers above me, hidden until now by the fog and the curve of the path. The water falls in a thin silver line, no wider than my finger, but constant and sure. It has been falling like this for longer than anyone can remember. It will keep falling long after I am gone. The water collects in a small pool at the base of the rock. The pool is perfectly round, as if someone carved it from the stone with careful hands. But I know no one carved it. The water carved it, drop by drop, year by year, century by century. Steam rises from the surface of the pool. The water is warm. Even on this cold morning, even with frost on the ground and fog in the air, the water is warm. It comes from deep inside the earth, from places where the sun's heat has been stored in stone for thousands of years. I stand at the edge of the pool and look down into the dark water. It is clear, so clear I can see the bottom, even though it is deeper than I am tall. Small stones line the bottom, smooth and round and perfectly arranged, as if someone placed them there on purpose. But I know the water placed them there, moving them grain by grain, until they found their perfect positions. The surface of the water is so still, it looks like black glass. It reflects the grey sky above the thin line of falling water, and my own face looking down. But my reflection looks different here, softer somehow, younger, as if the warm water has the power to show me not as I am, but as I remember being. I kneel beside the pool. The stones around the edge are warm to the touch, heated by the water that laps against them. I place my palms flat against the smooth rock and feel the warmth spread up my arms into my shoulders, down through my chest. The fog has almost completely lifted now. I can see the rock face that rises above the spring, covered with green moss that stays bright even in winter. Water seeps through cracks in the stone, feeding the moss, keeping it alive when everything else has gone brown and dormant. Behind me, the path continues deeper into the hills. I know if I followed it, it would lead me to other springs, other pools, other places where the earth gives up its secrets to those who walk quietly enough to find them. But I am not ready to walk that far, not yet. This spring is enough. This pool is what I came to find, even though I did not know I was searching for it when I left my bed in the gray hour before dawn. I sit back on my heels and watch the thin line of water fall into the pool. It makes the smallest possible sound, a whisper, a sigh, a breath being released. The sound is hypnotic. It pulls my thoughts down into the rhythm of its falling, drop by drop, moment by moment, breath by breath. My feet are getting cold inside my thin shoes. I can feel the frost working its way through the leather, through my woolen stockings, into my skin. But it is a good cold, a clean cold. It reminds me that I am alive, that I am here, that this moment is real and not just a dream. I unlace my shoes with fingers that move slowly in the cold air. The leather laces are stiff with frost, but they bend to my touch. I pull off first one shoe, then the other. Then I peel away my stockings, heavy with moisture from the fog and my long walk. My feet are pale against the dark stones. The cold makes them look almost blue, but they do not hurt. The warmth from the pool-heated stones seeps up through my soles, through my bones, into the core of me. I stretch my toes and watch them curl against the rock. Such small things, my feet, such ordinary things, but they have carried me here, step by step, along the winding path through the fog. They have been faithful servants, asking for nothing but the chance to keep walking. The water continues to fall into the pool, steady, eternal, indifferent to my presence, but somehow welcoming, as if it has been waiting for me to arrive, to bear witness to its quiet work of shaping stone and warming the earth. I stand and move closer to the edge of the pool. The warm water laps against the stones, just inches from my bare feet. I can feel the heat rising from its surface, mixing with the cold air to create small currents that brush against my legs, my arms, my face. The urge to step into the water is strong, to feel its warmth surround my cold feet, to let it work its way up my legs, to sink down into it until it covers me completely. But something holds me back, not fear, but a sense that I am not ready yet, that there are things I need to do first, preparations I need to make. Instead, I kneel again and cup my hands in the warm water. It feels like silk against my palms, like liquid warmth, like the touch of something ancient and knowing. I lift my hands and let the water run through my fingers, back into the pool. It catches what little light filters through the clouds and sparkles for a moment before disappearing into the dark surface. I do this again and again, cupping the water, lifting it, letting it flow back where it came from. Each time I feel the warmth spread a little further up my arms. Each time the cold seems to retreat a little further from my skin. The rhythm of this simple action matches the rhythm of the falling water, the rhythm of my breathing, the rhythm of my heart. Everything is connected here. Everything moves together in a slow dance that has no beginning and no end. I close my eyes and listen to the sounds around me. The falling water, the gentle lapping of the pool against its stone edges, the whisper of wind moving through the bare branches of trees I cannot see. My own breath, slow and steady, mixing with the cold air and the warm steam from the spring. Somewhere in the distance, I hear the faint sound of the village waking up, doors opening, voices calling, the everyday sounds of people beginning their daily work. But those sounds seem to come from another world, a world I am no longer part of, at least not in this moment. In this moment, I belong to the spring, to the warm water and the cold air and the thin line of silver that falls from the crack in the rock. I belong to the fog that still clings to the hills around me, to the frost that glitters on the stones, to the silence that wraps around everything like a blanket. I open my eyes and look up at the rock face above the spring. Water has carved channels in the stone, dark lines that trace the path of countless years of rain and melting snow. Moss grows in these channels, bright green against the grey rock. It looks like writing in a language I almost understand, like a message left by the water for anyone patient enough to read it. The message seems to say, "Be still, be patient, let time do its work. Let the small actions, repeated over and over, carve their channels in the stone of your life. Let the warmth that comes from deep inside the earth find its way to the surface. Let it pool where others can find it, where they can cup it in their hands and feel its heat spread through their bodies." I understand this message, though I could not explain it in words. I feel it in my bones, in the warmth that spreads through me as I kneel beside the pool. This is why I came here, not for any specific purpose, but for this feeling, this sense of connection to something larger and older and more patient than my everyday concerns. My knees are getting sore from kneeling on the hard stone, but I do not want to move. I want to stay here forever, watching the water fall, listening to its quiet song, feeling the warmth rise from the pool to meet the cold air. I want to become part of this place, as permanent and patient as the spring itself. But I know I cannot stay forever. Eventually, I will have to put on my shoes and stockings and walk back along the path to the village. I will have to return to the world of closed doors and smoking chimneys, of daily tasks and human voices. I will have to become ordinary again, but not yet. For now, I can stay. For now, I can be nothing but a person, kneeling beside a warm spring in the cold morning air, watching water fall and feeling the heat of the earth rise to meet me. The fog has lifted enough that I can see more of the landscape around the spring. Hills roll away in all directions, covered with bare trees and patches of snow. The sky is still grey, but it is a lighter grey now, touched with the suggestion of sun somewhere above the clouds. I realize I am hungry. I have been walking for a long time without eating, and my body is beginning to remind me of its needs. But I am not ready to leave yet. Instead, I reach into the small bag I carry at my waist and pull out a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. It is hard bread, dark and dense, the kind that keeps well on long journeys. I break off a small piece and chew it slowly, savoring the grainy texture, the slight sourness that comes from the long fermentation. It tastes like home, like the hearth where it was baked, like the hands that kneaded the dough and shaped it into loaves. As I eat, I continue to watch the water fall into the pool. The thin silver line never wavers, never stops, never changes its rhythm. It is the most reliable thing in the world, this falling water, more reliable than the sun, which sometimes hides behind clouds, more reliable than the seasons, which sometimes come late or stay too long. I finish the bread and wrap the cloth carefully before putting it back in my bag. Then I cup my hands in the warm water again and drink. The water tastes of stone and minerals, of deep places in the earth where the sun has never shone. It tastes clean and ancient and alive. The warmth spreads through me as I swallow, not just physical warmth, but something else, something that reaches into the cold places in my heart, the places where worry and sadness and loneliness have taken root. The water seems to melt those cold places, to replace them with something soft and glowing and peaceful. I drink again and again until I am no longer thirsty. Then I sit back on my heels and simply watch the water fall. Watch the steam rise from the pool. Watch the light change as the sun moves behind the clouds, invisible but present. Time moves differently here beside the spring. Minutes could be passing, or hours. I have no way to tell, and it does not matter. All that matters is this moment, this place, this feeling of being exactly where I need to be. The cold is beginning to work its way through my clothes, now that I have been sitting still for so long. My back aches from the position I have been holding. My feet are starting to go numb where they touch the cold stones. But these small discomforts feel distant, unimportant. They belong to my body, but I am more than my body right now. I am part of something larger. I think about the people in the village, waking up in their warm beds, preparing for another day of work and worry and small pleasures. I think about my own bed, empty now. The blankets thrown back where I left them when the call to walk came to me in the dark hour before dawn. Will they wonder where I am? Will they look for me when I do not appear at the usual times, in the usual places? Or will they understand, somehow, that I needed to walk away from their world for a while, to find something I could not find within the circle of thatched roofs and smoking chimneys? I hope they will understand. I hope they will know that I will return, that this is not a leaving, but a visit, a pilgrimage to a shrine I did not know existed, until I found myself walking toward it in the fog and the cold. The water continues to fall. The pool continues to hold it, warm and dark and welcoming. The steam continues to rise, carrying with it the breath of the deep earth, the whispered secrets of stone and root and underground rivers. I am part of this now, part of the cycle of water falling and pooling and rising and falling again, part of the conversation between hot and cold, between stone and liquid, between the deep places and the surface world. My breathing slows to match the rhythm of the falling water. My heartbeat adjusts to the pulse of warmth rising from the pool. My thoughts quiet until they are no more than ripples on the surface of my mind, forming and dissolving and forming again like the small waves that lap against the edges of the spring. This is peace. This is what I came to find, though I did not know its name when I set out. Peace that comes not from the absence of cold or discomfort or uncertainty, but from being in harmony with them. Peace that comes from sitting still long enough to hear the song that the world is always singing. If only we stopped moving and talking and worrying long enough to listen. The song is made of falling water and rising steam, of wind in bare branches and stone warming in the weak winter sun. It is made of my own breathing, my own heartbeat, my own small presence beside this ancient spring. All of these sounds woven together into something that is both simple and infinitely complex, both familiar and eternally mysterious. I could try to remember this song when I return to the village. I could try to hum it while I work, or whisper it to myself when the concerns of daily life threaten to overwhelm me. But I know it will not be the same. The song belongs here, beside the spring, in the cold air and the warm steam, and the silence that wraps around everything like a blessing. Still, something of it will stay with me. Some echo of its peace will remain in my bones, in the warmth that the spring water has left in my hands. In the memory of this morning when the fog lifted and I found myself exactly where I needed to be, the light is changing again. Not brighter, but different. The gray of the sky is beginning to show hints of other colors, pale yellow where the sun struggles to break through, deep blue in the shadows between the hills. The day is moving forward, as days do, carrying me with it toward whatever comes next. I know I will have to leave soon. My body is getting too cold to sit still much longer, and there are things waiting for me in the village. Tasks that need doing, people who will expect to see me, the ordinary rhythm of ordinary days that makes up most of life. But I am not the same person who walked away from the village in the fog and the cold. Something has changed in me during these hours beside the spring. Some knot has loosened, some door has opened, some fear has been replaced by trust. Trust in what? In the reliability of water falling into patient stones, in the warmth that rises from deep places when we are still enough to feel it, in the possibility that peace is not something we have to earn or achieve, but something we can find simply by walking away from our familiar paths and following the sound of water dripping in the distance. I stand slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knees and back. My feet are numb with cold, and it takes a moment for the feeling to return to them as I shift my weight. But the warmth in my chest remains, the glow that has been growing since I first cupped the spring water in my hands. I look down at the pool one more time. The water is so still, it perfectly reflects the sky, the rock face, the thin line of falling water. It reflects my own face too, but the reflection looks calm now, at peace in a way I have not felt for a long time. I pick up my stockings and shoes, bend, sit on a nearby stone to put them on. The wool is damp and cold, and the leather is stiff with frost. But my feet are warm now from the heated stones, and the cold fabric feels refreshing rather than uncomfortable. As I lace up my shoes, I listen to the spring one more time, the sound of falling water, steady and eternal and infinitely patient, the sound of something that knows its place in the world and fulfills its purpose without question or complaint. I want to learn that kind of patience, that kind of certainty, that kind of peace with doing the same small thing over and over, because it is the right thing to do, and because each repetition is both complete in itself and part of something larger. I stand and shoulder my small bag. The path back to the village is clearer now that the fog has lifted. I can see it winding between the hills, marked by the stones that have been worn smooth by the feet of other seekers, other people who walked away from their ordinary lives to find something they could not name. I take one last look at the spring, memorizing the way the water falls in its thin silver line, the way the steam rises from the dark pool, the way the green moss clings to the grey rock face. I want to remember all of this, to carry it with me like a talisman against the cold and the worry and the small cruelties of everyday life. Then I turn and begin to walk back along the path. My feet know the way now, even though I am walking in the opposite direction. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. The same rhythm that brought me here, now carrying me home. But I am not the same person walking back as I was walking away. I carry something new inside me now, something warm and patient and alive. I carry the memory of water falling into stone, of steam rising into cold air, of peace that comes not from having what we want, but from being present to what is. The village appears ahead of me, its thatched roofs and smoking chimneys looking small and temporary against the vast hills that surround them, but not unimportant. The people in those houses are living their lives as fully as they know how, loving and working and worrying and hoping. They are part of the same world as the spring, part of the same conversation between earth and water and air and fire. I am ready to rejoin them now, ready to return to the world of voices and tasks and human concerns. But I will not forget the song of the falling water, or the warmth that rises from deep places when we are still enough to feel it. I will carry these things with me like seeds, planting them in the ordinary moments of ordinary days, watching to see what grows. My shadow stretches ahead of me on the path as I walk toward home. It is longer now than it was when I left, because the sun has moved across the sky, even though I could not see it through the clouds. Time has passed, as time always does, but it has been time well spent, time that has changed me in ways I am only beginning to understand. The warmth in my chest grows stronger as I approach the village, not because I am excited to return, but because I know now that I can leave again whenever I need to. The path to the spring will always be there, winding through the hills, leading to the place where water falls into stone and steam rises into cold air, and peace waits for anyone patient enough to find it. This knowledge is a gift I give to myself, the gift of knowing that there is always somewhere to go when the noise of the world becomes too loud, when the weight of daily concerns becomes too heavy, when I forget who I am beneath all the things I do and say and worry about. I reach the edge of the village as the first real sunlight of the day breaks through the clouds. It falls in golden shafts between the houses, illuminating the smoke that rises from the chimneys, warming the frost-covered ground. The light is beautiful, but it is not more beautiful than the grey fog that wrapped around me as I walked to the spring. Both have their place in the rhythm of the day, just as leaving and returning both have their place in the rhythm of the heart. I walk between the houses toward my own door, my own hearth, my own bed with its rumpled blankets. People are beginning to emerge from their homes, starting their daily work, greeting each other in the soft voices of early morning. A few nod to me as I pass, but they do not ask where I have been. Perhaps they understand, somehow, that some journeys are too private to share, too sacred to explain. Or perhaps they simply trust that I will tell them what they need to know, when they need to know it. This trust is another gift, one I have not noticed before. The gift of being part of a community that allows its members to disappear for a while, to walk their own paths, to return when they are ready without having to account for every step. I reach my door and pause with my hand on the latch. Inside, my life is waiting for me. My tasks, my responsibilities, my small corner of the ordinary world. But I am ready for them now in a way I was not ready when I left in the grey hour before dawn. I am ready because I carry the spring with me now. The memory of falling water and rising steam, of peace that comes from being still enough to hear the song the world is always singing. This memory will inform everything I do, every choice I make, every response I give to the inevitable challenges and sorrows and small joys that make up a human life. I lift the latch and step inside, closing the door softly behind me. The interior of my small house is dim and cool, filled with the familiar smells of wood smoke and wool, and the herbs that hang drying from the rafters. It smells like home, like safety, like the place where I belong when I am not walking paths through fog and frost toward springs I did not know I was seeking. But it also smells, somehow, of the adventure I have just returned from, of cold air and warm water, and the green scent of moss growing on stone. These smells will fade, but they will never completely disappear. They are part of me now, woven into my hair and clothes and skin like memories made tangible. I hang my cloak on its peg and sit on my bed to remove my shoes. The leather is warmer now and more flexible, having adjusted to the heat of my body during the walk home. My stockings are damp but no longer cold. My feet are tired but satisfied, like servants who have completed important work. As I prepare to return to the rhythm of my ordinary day, I carry with me the gift of the spring, the knowledge that peace is always available, always, waiting, always as close as the sound of water falling into stone. All I have to do is listen for it, and when I hear it, follow the sound until I find its source. This is how I will live now, with one ear always tuned to the song of falling water, one part of my heart always ready to walk away from the familiar and toward the mysterious, not because I do not love my ordinary life, but because I love it more when I remember that it is part of something larger, something ancient, something infinitely patient and endlessly renewing. The sun climbs higher in the sky outside my small window. The day spreads out before me, full of possibility and purpose. But beneath the busy surface of hours and tasks and interactions, I will carry the silence of the spring, the warmth of its water, the peace of its patient falling into stone. This is enough. This is everything. This is the gift I brought back from my morning walk through fog and frost to a place I did not know I was seeking, where I found something I did not know I had lost. The wooden door closes behind me with a soft thud that echoes through the stone chamber. I stand for a moment in the darkness, feeling the warmth rise from somewhere below. The air is thick here, heavy with moisture and the scent of minerals. My eyes adjust slowly to the dim light that filters down from above, through gaps in the wooden ceiling where steam escapes in thin white ribbons. This place exists beneath the village, carved into the living rock by hands that worked centuries ago. Stone steps lead down from the door, worn smooth by countless feet, slick with condensation that never fully dries. The walls are dark stone, black with moisture and age, though I cannot see them clearly in the half-light. But I can feel them, feel the weight of rock surrounding me, the sense of being held deep in the earth's embrace. Feel the warmth that radiates from the stone itself, heated by the same forces that feed the spring where I knelt this morning. That seems like days ago now, though the sun has barely moved across the sky. I descend the steps slowly, one hand trailing along the stone wall for balance. The rock is warm to the touch, almost hot in places where the heat from below has concentrated. Steam rises around my feet as I walk, carrying with it the scent of deep earth and clean water and something else, something ancient and patient and alive. At the bottom of the steps, the chamber opens into a larger space. Here, the light is better, though still dim. It comes from openings high in the walls, small gaps that let in threads of daylight and let out the steam that rises constantly from the pool at the center of the room. The pool is larger than the spring where I knelt this morning, much larger. It stretches from one side of the chamber to the other, its edges carved into the stone floor with the same careful precision as everything else in this hidden place. The water is dark, so dark it looks black until the steam shifts, and I catch glimpses of its true color, a deep brown-green, like forest shadows, made liquid. Steam rises from the surface in constant, shifting columns. It catches the light that filters down from above and transforms it into something ethereal, something that belongs more to dreams than to the waking world. The whole chamber seems to breathe with the rhythm of this rising steam, expanding and contracting like the lungs of some vast, sleeping creature. I stand at the edge of the pool and look down into the water. Unlike the spring above, this pool has no visible bottom. The water disappears into darkness, into depths that could go down for a few feet or a few hundred. There is no way to tell, and somehow this uncertainty is comforting rather than frightening. It suggests mysteries that are meant to remain, mysterious depths that are meant to remain unexplored. The heat rising from the water warms my face, my hands, the front of my body, but my back is still cool from the air that seeps down from above, creating a contrast that makes me acutely aware of my skin, of the boundary between my body and the world around it. I set down the small bundle I have brought with me, a clean shift and a rough towel, both woven from the coarse linen that grows in the fields around our village. They feel suddenly insignificant here in this stone cathedral of heat and steam and ancient purpose. But they are what I have, what I need for what comes next. The pool has stone ledges carved into its sides at different levels, like steps leading down into the dark water. The first ledge is just below the surface, barely submerged. The second is deeper than the third, until they disappear into the mysterious depths where the light cannot reach. I know this place, though I have been here only a few times before. Always, in winter, always when the cold has worked its way so deeply into my bones that ordinary warmth is not enough to drive it out. Always when I need to be remade, to be born again from the womb of heated stone and ancient water. The process always begins the same way, with the careful removal of each piece of clothing, each layer that separates me from the embrace of the warm air and the warmer water. I begin with my shoes, setting them carefully beside my bundle of clean things. Then my stockings, still damp from my morning walk to the spring. My dress comes next, pulled over my head and folded with the same care I would give to any precious thing. The fabric is rough wool, woven by my own hands on the loom that sits beside my window. It has kept me warm through many winters, has been faithful in its service. It deserves to be treated with respect, even as I prepare to abandon it temporarily for something more intimate than clothing. The air touches my skin as each piece of fabric is removed. First my arms, then my shoulders, then my back as the dress lifts away. The contrast between the warm air and my cool skin creates a sensation like being caressed by invisible hands, gentle and welcoming and patient. My undershift is the last barrier between me and the heated air. It is made of softer fabric than my dress, linen that has been washed and worn until it feels like silk against my skin. But even this must go. Even this last small protection must be set aside. I pull the shift over my head and fold it carefully with the rest of my clothes. Then I stand naked at the edge of the pool, feeling the steam rise, pour around me like an embrace, like a welcome, like a blessing. The air moves against my skin in ways that clothing never allows. Every small current, every shift in temperature, Every place where the steam condenses and runs down my arms, my back, my legs, all of this becomes a form of touch, a conversation between my body and the world around it. I am not cold, despite being naked in a stone chamber beneath the earth. The air is warm, heated by the same forces that warm the water, and the water radiates its own heat, rising in waves that wrap around me even before I enter it. I step onto the first ledge, and the water rises to cover my feet. It is almost too hot, the kind of heat that makes you gasp and pull back for a moment, while your body adjusts. But I do not pull back. I have learned to trust this heat, to let it do its work of driving out the cold that lives in deeper places than clothing can reach. The stone beneath my feet is smooth as glass, worn by centuries of water and the feet of other women who came here for the same reasons I have come, for healing, for renewal, for the particular kind of peace that can only be found by sinking into heated water while steam rises around you like incense. I stand on the first ledge for a long moment, letting my feet adjust to the temperature, letting the heat begin its slow work of penetrating my skin, my muscles, my bones. The water reaches just to my ankles, but already I can feel its effects spreading upward, as if the heat has its own intelligence, its own purpose. The steam swirls around my legs, around my hips, around my waist. It touches me everywhere. This warm mist, caressing skin that rarely feels the touch of anything but fabric and air. It is like being embraced by the breath of the earth itself, by the exhalation of forces so ancient and powerful that they make my daily concerns seem as insubstantial as the steam itself. I step down to the second ledge, and the water rises to my knees. The heat bow is more intense here, but my body is beginning to adjust, beginning to welcome what initially felt like too much. This is how it always is with the pool. It offers more than you think you can accept, then helps you discover that you can accept more than you knew. My legs disappear into the dark water, becoming part of something larger than myself. I can feel the heat spreading upward, following the pathways of blood and nerve and bone, seeking out the places where tension lives, where worry has taken up residence, where the accumulated weight of ordinary days has settled like sediment. The water on this second ledge reaches to my thighs, lapping gently against skin that has forgotten what such warmth feels like. I stand here, longer than I stood on the first ledge, letting my body adjust not just to the temperature but to the strange sensation of being partially submerged, partially exposed to the warm air above. This is a threshold place, this second ledge, neither fully in the water nor fully out of it, neither completely surrendered to the heat nor still holding back from it. I exist in the space between, and there is something important about honoring this space, about not rushing toward the deeper waters until I am truly ready. The steam continues to rise around me, thicker now that more of my body is generating heat in contact with the water. It creates a cocoon of warm mist that makes the world beyond the pool seem distant and unreal. The stone walls fade into grey shadows. The ceiling disappears entirely. There is only the water, the steam, the heat that surrounds me like a living thing. I close my eyes and listen to the sounds of this place. The gentle lapping of water against stone as small currents move through the pool. The soft hiss of steam rising into the cool air above. The echo of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Each drop falling into the pool with a sound like a bell made of liquid silver. But underneath these sounds, almost too quiet to hear, there is something else. A deeper sound. A vibration that seems to come not through the air, but through the stone itself. It is the sound of the earth's heart beating, of forces moving in the deep places, of heat rising from the core of the world to warm the water that holds me. This sound enters my body through my feet, where they rest on the smooth stone ledge. It travels up through my bones, through my spine, until it resonates in my chest like a second heartbeat. My own heart begins to sync with this deeper rhythm, slowing to match the patient pulse of the earth beneath me. Standing here in the warm water, surrounded by steam and stone and the whispered promise of deeper immersion, I begin to understand why the women of my grandmother's generation spoke of this place only in hushed voices, only when they were sure no men could overhear. This is not just a place of physical cleansing. It is a place of transformation, of return to something more fundamental than the identities we wear in the daylight world. I step down to the third ledge, and the water rises to my waist. The heat is intense now, almost overwhelming, but my body welcomes it like a lover's embrace. The water wraps around my hips, my lower back, the soft curve of my belly. It supports me, holds me, accepts the full weight of my body with a generosity that brings tears to my eyes. Pure, standing waist deep in the ancient pool, I feel the last of my resistance dissolve. The part of me that always holds something back, that always maintains some small distance from experience, finally lets go. I am not separate from the water now. I am part of it, and it is part of me. The heat penetrates deeper than skin, deeper than muscle. It reaches into places where old sorrows live, where fears have made their nests, where the accumulated tension of a lifetime has crystallized into knots that I had forgotten were there. As the heat finds these places, they begin to soften, to release, to dissolve back into the flowing currents of a body finally allowed to remember its own fluidity. My breathing slows and deepens. Each inhalation brings in the mineral, rich air, thick with steam and the earthy scent of heated stone. Each exhalation releases something I no longer need. A worry, a regret, a small piece of the armor I wear against the world's sharp edges. The water moves around me in subtle currents, as if it has its own circulation, its own tides. These movements caress my skin, creating sensations that are almost too gentle to notice, but somehow more intimate than any touch I have ever known. It is as if the water is reading my body, learning its contours, understanding its needs. I look down at myself through the dark water and the rising steams. My body looks different here, softened by the heat and the movement of water, and the way the steam blurs the edges of everything. I look like someone from a dream, someone made of mist and shadow and warm stone, someone more essential than the woman who tends fires and weaves cloth and walks through villages full of familiar faces. The transformation is not just visual. I can feel it happening in my muscles, my bones, my blood. The heat is doing its ancient work of renewal, burning away the accumulated debris of ordinary days, leaving behind something cleaner, simpler, more true. I have been standing on this third ledge for a long time now, but time moves differently here in the pool. Minutes could be hours, or hours could be minutes. The only measure that matters is the measure of my body's readiness, its willingness to surrender completely to the healing heat. That readiness comes gradually, like dawn breaking over the hills. First, a lightening around the edges of my awareness. Then, a growing sense of trust, of safety, of being held by forces larger and more reliable than my own small will. Finally, the moment when I know without question that I am ready to descend to the fourth ledge, to immerse myself completely in the dark, warm embrace of the pool. I step down, and the water rises to my chest. The heat is almost unbearable now, but unbearable in the way that intense pleasure is unbearable. Too much sensation, too much aliveness, too much presence in my own skin. My heart pounds, but not with fear, with exhilaration, with the wild joy of a body finally remembering what it was made for. The water supports my breasts, lifts them, holds them like gentle hands. Steam rises from my shoulders, from the surface of the water where it meets my skin. I am a creature of mist and heat now, no longer quite solid, no longer quite separate from the elements that surround me. The fourth ledge is deep enough that I must hold onto the edge of the pool to keep my balance. My feet rest on smooth stone, but the rest of my body floats, supported by water that has become dense with minerals and heat. I feel weightless, suspended between the earth below and the air above, held in a state of perfect equilibrium. Here, with the water lapping at my collarbones, I close my eyes and let myself drift into a state that is deeper than relaxation, more complete than rest. It is a state of dissolution, of boundaries softening, until I am no longer sure where my body ends and the water begins. The heat works its way into the deepest places now, into joints that have been stiff with cold and overuse, into muscles that have been tight with worry and work, into the spaces between my ribs where breath has been shallow, into the base of my skull where thoughts have been spinning like leaves in a whirlwind. As each tense place releases, I sink a little deeper into the water, a little further into the state of liquid peace that the pool offers. My body becomes heavier and lighter at the same time, heavier because it is finally relaxed enough to feel its own weight, lighter because that weight is being held by something other than my own effort. The sounds of the chamber fade into a gentle murmur that might be water moving or air breathing or my own. Blood circulating through veins that have opened like flowers in the heat. All boundaries become soft here. The boundary between inside and outside, between self and water, between conscious thought and the deeper intelligence of the body. bathe with the rhythm of the rising steam. In as the mist gathers around me, out as it disperses into the cool air above. This breathing connects me to the breath of the chamber itself, to the exhalation of the earth through this opening in its surface. I am part of a larger breathing now, a circulation that includes the deep waters and the heated stone and the roots of mountains. My thoughts, when they come, are like bubbles rising through the water, transparent, ephemeral, released as soon as they form. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to follow them or fight them or give them meaning. They are just part of the natural effervescence of a mind finally allowed to be still. Sometimes images float through this stillness. The spring where I knelt, this morning, its thin silver line of falling water. The path through the fog, winding between hills that seemed to breathe with mist. The moment when the steam first rose around my feet as I stepped into this pool. But even these images are soft-edged, dreamlike, more like memories of memories than actual recollections. They belong to the person I was, before I descended into the pool, before the heat began its work of transformation. That person seems distant now, like someone I knew long ago but have not seen for years. The water continues its gentle circulation around my body, creating currents that massage my skin with a touch lighter than silk, warmer than sunlight. These currents seem to have intelligence, seem to know exactly where to apply pressure, where to caress, where to simply hold steady and allow the heat to do its work. I let my head fall back until the water laps at the base of my skull. The heat penetrates my scalp, my temples, the place where my jaw connects to my skull and holds so much unconscious tension. As this tension releases, my face changes, softening into an expression I rarely wear in the daylight world, an expression of complete trust, complete surrender, complete presence. The pool holds me like a mother holds a child, not possessively, but with infinite patience, infinite care, infinite willingness to provide exactly what is needed for as long as it is needed. There is no hurry here, no schedule to keep, no expectations to meet. There is only the slow, thorough work of healing, happening at the pace the body chooses, in the order the body requires. Time dissolves in the heat. I might have been in the pool for minutes or hours. The light filtering down from above might be brighter or dimmer than when I first descended, but I cannot tell. My awareness has narrowed to the immediate sensations of water and warmth, and the gentle movement of my own body floating in liquid embrace. But gradually, slowly, I become aware that something is shifting, not in the pool or the chamber, but in my own body. A sense of completion, of saturation. The heat has done its work, has penetrated as deeply as it can, has melted what needed to be melted, and softened what needed to be softened. My body knows this before my mind does, knows that it is time to begin the gradual process of emerging, of returning to the world of air and separateness and the thousand small tasks that make up an ordinary day, but not yet, not all at once. The transition must be as gradual as the immersion was, as respectful of the body's wisdom. I stay on the fourth ledge a while longer, but now my awareness begins to expand beyond the immediate sensations of heat and water. I notice the play of light and shadow on the stone walls. The way the steam creates constantly shifting patterns as it rises toward the gaps in the ceiling. The echo of my own breathing in the enclosed space. These observations are gentle, without urgency. They are simply the first signs that my consciousness is beginning to surface from the deep immersion, like a swimmer rising slowly from the bottom of a pool. There is no rush, no need to force the process. It happens in its own time, at its own pace. When I am ready, and I will know when I am ready, I will step up to the third ledge, then to the second, then to the first. Each step will be a small return to the ordinary world, a small reassertion of the boundaries between self and other, between my body and the elements that surround it. But for now, I float in the perfect heat of the fourth ledge, held between the stone below and the air above, between the person I was when I descended and the person I will be when I emerge. This is the moment of transformation, happening so slowly and so gently that it feels like the most natural thing in the world. The water laps against my throat, my chin, the soft place where my jaw meets my neck. Steam rises from my shoulders in thin white ribbons that dissolve into the warm air above. My hair floats around my face like dark seaweed, moving with the subtle currents of the pool. I am remade here, not dramatically, not with thunder and lightning, but with the patient persistence of heated water working on stone. The hard places in me have softened. The cold places have warmed. The tight places have opened. What emerges from this pool will be the same person who descended into it, but also somehow new. This is the gift of the pool. The reason why women have been coming here for centuries, when the cold gets too deep in their bones, when the weight of their days becomes too heavy to carry. Not for dramatic transformation, but for this gentle return to fluidity. This reminder that we are made mostly of water, and water knows how to flow. The heat continues its work even as I prepare to leave it. Each moment in the pool is complete in itself, requiring nothing more than my presence, my willingness to be held and warmed and slowly transformed. This is a different kind of time than the time I live in the village above, cyclical rather than linear, measured not in hours but in the rhythm of breathing, the pulse of circulation, the slow opening of flowers deep in the body. I know I will carry some of this time with me when I return to the surface. Not all of it. That would be impossible, and perhaps not even desirable. The everyday world requires a different kind of presence, a different kind of energy. But some echo of this deep time will remain in my bones, reminding me that beneath the urgency of daily tasks, there is always this deeper rhythm, always this possibility of return. The steam swirls around me in patterns that seem almost deliberate, almost conscious. It touches my face with the gentleness of a blessing, carries away the last traces of tension from the corners of my eyes. The place where my lips press together when I am worried. The spot between my eyebrows where concerns gather like small storms. As these places soften, my face changes again. Not dramatically. I do not become a different person, but subtly. The way a landscape changes when harsh light gives way to the golden hour before sunset. Everything is the same, but everything is also somehow more itself, more true to its essential nature. This is what the pool does. It does not impose change from the outside, but creates conditions where the truest version of yourself can emerge. Like a sculptor who does not add material to the stone, but only removes what does not belong. The heated water strips away what is not essential, what is not truly me. What remains is simpler, cleaner, more present. The part of me that exists before, but I put on the persona I wear for the world. Before I take up the roles and responsibilities that define my daily life. Not a rejection of those roles. They are necessary and meaningful, but a return to the source from which they spring. I breathe deeply, and the mineral-rich air fills my lungs completely for the first time in months. My ribs expand, my back straightens without effort. My shoulders settle into their natural position. The water supports this opening, this uncurling, this gradual return to the posture of someone who is not carrying more than she can bear. The transformation is nearly complete now. I can feel it in the way my body floats in the water, no longer fighting the heat, but fully integrated with it. I can feel it in the rhythm of my breathing, slower and deeper than when I first entered the pool. I can feel it in the quality of my attention, more spacious, more accepting, more present to the simple fact of being alive in this moment. But there is one more gift the pool has to offer. One more layer of the experience that reveals itself only to those who wait long enough, who surrender deeply enough, who trust the process completely. It comes as a moment of perfect stillness, not the absence of movement. The water still circulates, the steam still rises, my heart still beats, but a quality of presence so complete that everything becomes luminous, transparent, shot through with a light that seems to come from within. In this moment, I understand something that cannot be put into words, but can only be experienced. Something about the connection between my body and the earth, between the heat in the pool and the fire at the center of the world, between the water that holds me and the water that flows in my veins. I understand that this is not separate from my ordinary life, but is the hidden source of it, the warmth that will follow me back to the surface world, the peace that will inform my daily tasks, the sense of being held that will sustain me through the inevitable challenges and sorrows that are part of any human life. The moment passes, as such moments always do, but it leaves behind a residue, a quality of presence that will remain with me long after. I have dried my body and put on my clothes and climbed the stone steps back to be everyday world. Now I am truly ready to begin the emergence, not because the experience is complete. Such experiences are never truly complete, but because I have received what I came for, what I needed without knowing I needed it. I prepare to step up to the third ledge, to begin the gradual return to the world of air and separateness and individual will. But I move slowly, honoring the magnitude of what has transpired, respecting the body's need to adjust gradually to each change in temperature, each shift in the relationship between self and environment. The pool has done its work. I have been remade, not into someone else, but into a truer version of myself. The cold that drove me here has been replaced by warmth that comes from deep within. The tension that knotted my muscles has dissolved into fluid ease. The worry that clouded my thoughts has evaporated like steam rising into clear air. This is how healing happens, not with grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs, but with the patient persistence of heated water, the gentle insistence of mineral-rich steam, the reliable support of stone carved by hands that understood the body's need for return, for renewal, for the particular peace that can only be found by surrendering completely to elements older and wiser than our small, anxious minds. I step up to the third ledge, and immediately I feel the difference. Less water supporting me, more of my body exposed to the air. The contrast is not unpleasant. The air is still warm, still thick with moisture, but it marks the beginning of the return, the first step in the journey back to the surface world. I stand on this ledge for several minutes, letting my body adjust, letting the water that still surrounds my waist continue its work, while I slowly accustom myself to being partially immersed. Steam continues to rise from my skin, where it meets the cooler air, creating the sensation of being caressed by invisible hands. This gradual emergence is as important as the gradual immersion was. The body needs time to adjust, to integrate the changes that have taken place. In the depths, to find a new equilibrium between the transformed self and the requirements of ordinary life. Pour on the second ledge, with water only to my knees. I begin to feel the return of individual identity, of the sense of myself as separate from the elements that surround me. But it is a gentler separateness than before, informed by the memory of dissolution, softened by the knowledge that boundaries are more fluid than they appear. On the first ledge, with water barely covering my feet, I am almost fully returned to the air-breathing world. But the heat still radiates up from the pool, still warms my legs, still reminds me of the deeper immersion that lies just a step away. I could descend again if I needed to, could return to the healing depths whenever the cold becomes too much to bear. This knowledge is a gift I carry with me as I finally step out of the pool onto the stone floor of the chamber. The gift of knowing that this resource exists, that this return is always possible, that beneath the village and the daily tasks and the familiar routines, there is always this refuge, this possibility of renewal. My body steams in the cooler air of the chamber floor. Water runs from my hair, my arms, my legs, creating small pools at my feet that reflect the dim light filtering down from above. I am a creature of mist and heat, not quite solid, not quite returned to the ordinary world. I reach for the rough towel I brought with me and begin the gentle process of drying my transformed skin. The fabric feels different against my body now, softer, more yielding. as if it too has been changed by the steam and heat of the chamber. As I dry myself, I notice changes in my body that go beyond the obvious effects of heat and moisture. My skin has a different quality, softer, more supple, glowing with a light that seems to come from within. My muscles move differently, more fluidly, without the small hitches and hesitations that come from chronic tension. But the most profound change is in the quality of my presence. I feel more here, more present in my own skin, more connected to the simple fact of being alive in this body, in this moment. The pool has returned me to myself, but to a self that is somehow both more essential and more connected to everything around me. I put on my clean shift, and the soft linen feels like silk against my heated skin. The fabric drapes differently on my relaxed body, follows curves that were hidden before by tension and holding. I am the same person, but somehow more myself than I was when I descended into the pool. My dress comes next, then my stockings, then my shoes. Each piece of clothing is a small step back toward the persona I wear in the daylight world. But underneath the familiar garments, the transformed body carries the memory of warmth, of support, of the particular peace that comes from surrendering completely to healing. I gather my damp towel and fold it carefully. The steam continues to rise from the pool, creating the same shifting patterns of light and shadow that welcomed me when I first entered this chamber. But now I am part of this dance of mist and heat, carry some of its essence in my warmed bones, my relaxed muscles, my quieted mind. The stone steps leading up to the door seem less steep now, less daunting. My body moves up them with an ease I had forgotten was possible. Each step a small celebration of renewed flexibility, of muscles that remember how to work together rather than against each other. At the top of the steps, I pause with my hand on the wooden door. Behind me, the chamber breathes with steam and heat and the ancient patience of stone and water. Ahead of me lies the ordinary world of tasks and voices and the 1,000 small decisions that make up a day. But I am ready for that world now, in a way I was not ready when I descended into the pool. I carry the warmth of the deep waters in my bones, the peace of the steam-filled chamber in my heart, the memory of dissolution and renewal in every cell of my body. I open the door and step into the bright world above, carrying with me the gift of the pool, not as something separate from my ordinary life, but as the hidden source that makes that life possible, the deep well from which all surface activities spring. The sun is lower in the sky than when I entered the chamber, casting longer shadows between the buildings of the village. But the light seemed brighter to my heat-opened eyes, more alive, more present. Everything looks the same, but I see it differently now, with the clarity that comes from being fully present in my own body, fully connected to the elements that sustain all life. This is how I return to the world, not as someone who has escaped from it, but as someone who has remembered her deepest connection to it. That pool has not separated me from life, but has returned me to its source, to the warm center from which all authentic action springs. I walk slowly through the village streets, feeling the ground solid beneath my feet, feeling the air cool against my heated skin, feeling the life that flows through me flow also through everything I see. The pool's gift is not just personal renewal, but renewed connection to the web of life that includes the stones of the street, the smoke rising from chimneys, the faces of neighbors going about their daily work. This is the true gift of the pool, not escape from the world, but deeper engagement with it, not separation from the body, but fuller inhabitation, not transcendence of ordinary life, by the recognition that ordinary life, seen clearly, is shot through with the same sacred heat that rises from the deep places of the earth. I carry this recognition with me as I walk toward home, toward the evening tasks that await me, toward the simple pleasure of being fully present in my own life. The pool's warmth will fade from my skin, its mineral scent will wash from my hair, but its deeper gift will remain, the memory of what it feels like to be completely at home in my own body, completely connected to the forces that sustain all life. This memory is enough to sustain me through whatever cold may come, whatever challenges may arise, whatever distance may grow between me and the feeling of being truly alive. I know now that the pool is always there, always waiting, always ready to offer its patient gift of renewal to anyone willing to descend into its healing depths and surrender to its ancient wisdom. The wooden roof above me breathes with the wind. I lie on my narrow bed, feeling the straw beneath me settle and shift with each movement of my body. The mattress is thin, worn soft by years of use, but tonight it feels like the most comfortable bed in the world. My body, still warm from the pool, sinks into it with a gratitude that comes from muscles finally allowed to be completely at rest. Through the gaps between the wooden slats of the roof, thin lines of moonlight find their way down to where I lie. They create a pattern of silver bars across the rough wool of my blanket, across the stone walls of my small room, across the floor where my clothes lie folded in a neat pile. The moon is full tonight, or nearly so. I can tell by the quality of the light that filters through the roof, not the thin, uncertain illumination of a crescent, but the full, confident radiance of a moon that has reached its complete roundness. It casts enough light to see by, enough to make shadows, enough to transform the familiar corners of my room into something mysterious and dreamlike. The wind moves through the village with a sound like breathing. It touches the thatched roofs, the wooden walls, the bare branches of the trees that grow between the houses. It finds the gaps in my roof and flows through them, bringing with it the scent of cold air and distant places, of fields sleeping under frost and hills that rise like sleeping giants against the star-filled sky. But I am not cold. The warmth from the pool still lives in my body, radiating from my core outward to my skin, keeping me comfortable despite the winter air that seeps through the walls and roof. This warmth is different from the heat of a fire or the insulation of heavy blankets. It comes from deep inside, from places the cold cannot reach. I stretch my arms above my head and feel the luxurious pool of muscles that have been thoroughly warmed, thoroughly relaxed, thoroughly reminded of their capacity for ease. My spine settles into the straw mattress like water finding its level. My shoulders release the last small tensions they were holding. My jaw, which I had not realized was clenched, softens and opens. This is a different kind of being in bed than I am used to. Usually, lying down is a necessity, something the body requires at the end of a long day of work. Sleep is something that happens to me, often fitful, often interrupted by the small aches and tensions that accumulate in muscles that work hard and rest incompletely. But tonight, lying here in the silver-barred moonlight, being in bed, feels like a choice rather than a necessity. My body wants to be horizontal, wants to feel the support of the mattress beneath it, wants to exist in the space between waking and sleeping, where thoughts become soft and boundaries become fluid. The moonlight shifts as clouds move across the sky above. One moment, the silver bars are clear and distinct across my blanket. The next, they are softened by the passage of thin clouds that filter the light without blocking it completely. Then they return, sharp and bright, creating a constantly changing pattern of illumination and shadow. I watch this play of light with the kind of attention I rarely have time for during daylight hours. During the day, light is simply the medium through which I see the tasks that need doing, the faces that need recognizing, the obstacles that need navigating. It is functional, taken for granted, rarely noticed for its own sake. But this moonlight is different. It serves no function except beauty, except the quiet pleasure of lying in bed and watching silver patterns move across wool and stone and skin. It invites a different kind of seeing, a more receptive kind of attention that asks nothing and expects nothing, but is simply present to what is. Through the gaps in the roof, I can see small pieces of the night sky, not the whole vast dome of it, but fragments framed by the dark lines of the wooden slats. In one gap, a cluster of stars. In another, the edge of a cloud edged with silver light. In a third, the deep black of empty space that seems to go on forever. These glimpses of sky feel more intimate than seeing the whole expanse would. They are like secrets shared through a partially opened door, like whispered fragments of a larger conversation that I am privileged to overhear. Each gap in the roof frames a different piece of the night, a different aspect of the vast story being told above the village, while its inhabitants sleep. The wind picks up, and the wooden slats creak softly in response. It is a gentle sound, like the house settling into sleep, like the material world acknowledging the passage of time and weather, and the slow work of seasons changing. I have heard this sound every night for years, but tonight I hear it differently. Not as a potential disturbance to sleep, but as a lullaby, as the voice of my small house joining the larger chorus of wind and weather and moonlight. My breathing slows to match the rhythm of the creaking roof, the movement of moonlight through clouds, the distant sound of wind in the bare trees. This is another rhythm I rarely notice during the day, the slow, deep breathing of a body at rest. a body not required to perform any task more complex than the simple miracle of staying alive. Each breath brings in air that tastes of cold and distance, and the particular clarity that comes with winter nights. Each exhalation releases something I no longer need, a small worry, a fragment of tension, a piece of the accumulated weight that builds up during days of purposeful activity. The warmth from the pool circulates through my body with each breath, spreading from my core to my extremities and back again. It is like having a small fire burning inside me, not hot enough to be uncomfortable, but warm enough to keep the cold at bay. Warm enough to remind me that life is a form of heat, a continuous generation of energy that flows through flesh and bone and blood. I shift position slightly, turning onto my side so I can see more clearly through the gap in the roof directly above my bed. Through this opening, I can see the moon itself, not the full disk, but a curved edge that suggests the whole. It is so bright it makes my eyes water slightly, but I do not look away. There is something hypnotic about that silver curve, something that pulls my attention and holds it in a way that feels both restful and energizing. The moon has been following its ancient path across the sky while I lay in the pool, while I walked home through the village streets, while I prepared for bed and settled into the straw mattress. It will continue its journey long after I have fallen asleep, long after I have woken and begun another day of ordinary tasks. This continuity is comforting in a way I cannot explain. The sense of being part of something larger and more reliable than my own small concerns. Lying here in the moonlight, I remember other nights when sleep would not come easily, when worry or physical discomfort or the simple restlessness of an overstimulated mind kept me tossing and turning until dawn. Those nights, the darkness felt heavy, oppressive, like something to be endured rather than enjoyed. The gaps in the roof let in cold draughts instead of welcome light. The creaking of the wooden slats sounded like complaints rather than lullabies. But tonight is different. Tonight, the darkness feels like a companion rather than an obstacle. The air that flows through the gaps in the roof brings freshness rather than chill. The sounds of the house settling feel like expressions of contentment rather than signs of decay or distress. This difference comes from the pool, I know, from the deep warming that has reached places in my body that are usually cold, from the thorough relaxation that has unknotted tensions I did not even know I was carrying. But it comes from something else as well, from a quality of presence that allows me to be here completely, without the part of my mind that is always planning the next day's activities, or reviewing the day's small failures and successes. The moonlight continues its slow dance across my blanket, my walls, my skin, where it touches me. I can feel a subtle tingling, as if the light itself carries some form of energy, some quality that nourishes in ways different from the warmth of sun or fire. It is cooler than solar heat, but somehow more penetrating, reaching through skin into deeper layers where dreams are born and memories are stored. I close my eyes and the moonlight still reaches me, filtered through my eyelids into a warm redness that pulses gently with the rhythm of my heart. Behind my closed eyes, I can still see the pattern of silver bars, but now they seem to be made of light itself, rather than simply illuminated wood and darkness. They move and shift like living things, like the bars of prayer, some benevolent cage that holds not to imprison but to protect. My body continues to settle into the mattress, feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because the deep relaxation allows me to feel the full weight of flesh and bone that I carry through the world. Lighter because that weight is now fully supported, no longer held by the constant small effort of muscles that have forgotten how to let go completely. The straw beneath me whispers softly as I shift position again, this time onto my back, so I can see more of the sky through the various gaps in the roof. The sound is like the rustling of dried grasses in autumn wind, like the whispered conversations of small creatures settling into their winter nests. It speaks of harvest time, of grain cut and gathered and stored against the cold months by, of the cycle of growing and dying and growing again that underlies all life. Through different gaps, I can see different constellations, different arrangements of stars that have been telling their stories since long before humans learned to build houses with roofs that leak moonlight. Some of these star patterns I know by name, learned from my grandmother, who learned them from her grandmother in an unbroken chain of women lying in beds and looking up at night sky through whatever openings their roofs provided. There is the great bear, lumbering across the northern sky with her cubs trailing behind. There is the hunter, his belt of 3 bright stars so distinctive that even a child can find them. There are others whose names I have forgotten or never learned, but whose positions I recognize, whose slow movement across the sky marks the passage of seasons more reliably than any calendar. Tonight, these familiar stars look different to me, more personal somehow, as if they are shining specifically for this moment. This particular arrangement of moonlight and roof gaps, and a woman lying in bed after a day of walking through fog and soaking in heated pools. They seem closer than usual, more present, more connected to the small drama of human life unfolding beneath them. This sense of connection extends beyond the stars to everything I can perceive from my position on the narrow bed. The moon, of course, but also the wind that moves through the village like a living thing, touching every roof and wall and tree with the same invisible hands that caress my face through the gaps above me. The cold air that flows down from the hills, carrying with it the scent of snow and stone, and the patient breathing of sleeping earth. Even the house itself feels alive tonight, more than just a shelter built from wood and stone and thatch. It breathes with the wind, settles with the changing temperature, responds to the movement of moon and clouds across the sky. I am not separate from it, lying here in my bed. I am part of the larger organism that includes the walls and roof and floor, the mice that nest in the thatch, the insects that sleep in the cracks between stones. My thoughts begin to loosen and drift like smoke from a banked fire. They do not disappear completely, but they lose their hard edges. their insistence on being followed and analyzed and resolved. Instead, they float through my consciousness like clouds across the moon, present for a moment, then gone, replaced by others that are equally insubstantial and equally temporary. I think of the spring where I knelt this morning, its thin line of falling water now silver in the moonlight, still dropping into the dark pool with the same patient persistence, whether anyone is there to witness it or not. The thought brings with it a sense of the water's reliability, its indifference to human presence or absence, its commitment to the simple task of falling, and pooling and overflowing in an endless cycle that connects this moment to all the moments that came before and all that will come after. The thought dissolves and is replaced by a memory of the pool beneath the village, still breathing steam into the darkness, still offering its ancient warmth to anyone willing to descend into its depths. But this memory, too, is soft around the edges, more like a dream of warmth than a specific recollection. It brings with it not detailed images, but a feeling, the feeling of being held, of being supported, of being slowly transformed by forces older and more patient than my own small will. Through the gap directly above my bed, a cloud passes across the moon, and for a moment the silver light dims to a softer glow. The bars of moonlight across my blanket fade, but do not disappear completely. Instead, they become suggestions of light, hints of illumination that make the darkness more intimate rather than more complete. In this softer light, the boundaries of my small room seem to expand. The walls recede into shadow, the ceiling disappears entirely, and I have the sensation of lying not in a closed space, but in a clearing in a vast forest, open to the sky and the wind and the movement of celestial bodies across the dome of night. This expansion of space comes with an expansion of time as well. The urgency that usually drives my days, the sense that there are tasks to be completed, appointments to be kept, problems to be solved, dissolves into something much more spacious. Time becomes circular rather than linear, measured not by the ticking of hours, but by the rhythm of breathing, the pulse of blood, the slow turning of the earth beneath the wheeling stars. My body continues its gradual surrender to sleep, but it is a different kind of surrender than I am used to. Usually, sleep feels like something that happens to me despite my resistance. Exhaustion overcoming alertness, consciousness fading reluctantly into unconsciousness. But tonight, sleep feels like something I am choosing, something I am welcoming, something I am moving toward with the same trust I felt when I stepped down into the heated pool. The warmth from the pool has distributed itself evenly through my body now, creating a gentle heat that extends from the core of me to the tips of my fingers and toes. It is not the intense heat I felt while submerged in the dark water, but a softer warmth that seems to glow rather than burn, that comforts rather than overwhelms. This inner warmth creates a cocoon around me, more effective than any blanket, even with the cold air flowing through the gaps in the roof, even with the winter wind finding its way through the cracks in the walls. I am perfectly comfortable. More than comfortable. I am suffused with a sense of being exactly where I need to be. Exactly as warm as I need to be. Exactly as supported as I need to be. The cloud passes, and the moon emerges again in its full brightness. The silver bars of light return to my blanket, but now they seem to be moving, shifting and flowing like liquid light rather than static illumination. This movement might be real, caused by smaller clouds passing across the moon, or by the subtle swaying of the roof in the wind, or it might be a product of eyes that are beginning to see with a different vision that comes at the threshold of sleep. I do not try to determine which it is. Instead, I simply watch the flowing patterns of light and shadow with the same receptive attention. I gaze to the steam rising from the pool. There is something hypnotic about this slow dance of illumination. Something that draws my consciousness deeper into the liminal space between waking and sleeping, where different kinds of perception become possible. In this space, the gaps in the roof begin to seem less like accidents of construction and more like deliberate windows, carefully placed to frame specific views of the night sky. Through one, I can see the bright star that sits at the tip of the hunter's sword. Through another, the dim glow of the Milky Way stretching across the heavens like a river of light. Through a third, the dark silhouette of a bare tree branch reaching toward stars it will never touch. Each of these views feels like a gift, like a carefully chosen vignette of the larger mystery that surrounds the village, the hills, the small bubble of human warmth and activity that I am part of. They remind me that beyond the familiar world of houses and streets and neighbors, there is another world, vast, ancient, indifferent to human concerns, but somehow not hostile to them. This other world includes the spring where I knelt in the fog, the pool where I dissolved into heated water, the path that winds through hills toward destinations I have never seen. It includes the wind that carries the scent of distant places, the stars that shine with the light of other suns, the moon that pulls the tides of oceans I will never see, but that somehow also pulls at the tides in my own blood. My breathing deepens and slows, matching the rhythm of this larger world, synchronizing with the pulse of forces that operate on scales of time and space that dwarf my own brief existence. But instead of making me feel insignificant, this synchronization makes me feel more connected, more part of something meaningful and beautiful and endlessly creative. The straw beneath me has warmed from my body heat, creating a nest that seems to have been shaped specifically for this moment. This particular arrangement of tired muscles and relaxed bones and skin still glowing with warmth from the pool. I sink deeper into this nest, feeling supported not just by the mattress, but by the floor beneath it, the earth. Beneath the floor, the vast solidity of the planet itself. This sense of being held extends upward as well as downward. The roof above me, despite its gaps and imperfections, provides shelter from the infinite openness of space. The walls around me, despite their permeability to wind and moonlight, create a boundary that defines this small space as mine, as a place where I belong. where I am safe to let go completely. Between the solid earth below and the sheltering roof above, I exist in a perfect balance of support and freedom, held securely enough to relax completely, but open enough to feel connected to the larger world of wind and stars and moonlight that extends far beyond the boundaries of my small room. The moon continues its ancient journey across the sky, and the angle of its light through the gaps in the roof shifts slightly. What were vertical bars of silver across my blanket become diagonal slashes. What were small squares of illumination on the stone wall become rectangles, then trapezoids, then fade altogether as the moon moves beyond the frame of one gap and has not yet entered the frame of another. This slow movement of light marks the passage of time more gently than any clock, more naturally than any human measurement. It connects this night to all the other nights when women have lain in beds and watched moonlight move across blankets, across walls, across faces that were young once and became old, while the moon continued its unchanging cycle. Think of my grandmother, who slept in this same bed before me, who watched moonlight through these same gaps in the roof, who felt the same straw mattress conform to the shape of her body night after night for decades. Did she lie here after days when she had walked to springs hidden in the hills? Did she return from pools carved deep in stone, carrying their warmth in her bones as I carry it now? The questions drift through my mind without urgency, without the need for answers. They are part of the soft conversation between past and present that happens in the threshold space before sleep, when the boundaries between self and other, between then and now, become permeable as moonlight through wooden slats. My grandmother's presence seems almost tangible in the room tonight, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a quality of attention, a way of being present to the simple miracle of lying in bed and feeling the slow transition from waking consciousness to the deeper mysteries of sleep and dream. She is part of the warmth that surrounds me, part of the sense of being held that extends beyond the physical support of mattress and walls to include the longer support of women who have lived and loved and found their own ways to peace. The wind picks up again, and the house responds with its familiar chorus of small sounds, the creaking of wooden beams, the rustling of thatch, the whispered conversation between materials that have weathered many seasons together. But tonight these sounds do not speak of wear or weakness. They speak of resilience, of structures that bend without breaking, of the wisdom that comes from learning to work with forces rather than against them. My own body feels part of this conversation between wind and house, part of the larger dialogue between human shelter and natural forces. I am not separate from the weather that moves through the village, but part of its circulation, part of the great breathing that includes mountains and valleys, forests and fields, the rise and fall of air pressure that drives clouds across the moon and brings the scent of snow from distant peaks. The warmth from the pool pulses gently through my bloodstream, mixing with the natural heat generated by a body at rest, creating a circulation of comfort that extends from heart to limbs and back again. This inner climate is stable and reliable, independent of the cold air that seeps through walls and roof, immune to the winter wind that rattles the wooden slats above me. But it is not separate from the larger climate of season and weather and the slow turning of the earth through its cycle of warmth and cold. Instead, it is connected to these larger rhythms, part of the endless conversation between inner and outer, between the fire that burns in the core of my body and the fire that burns in the core of the world. Through the gap above my bed, I watch a single star that seems brighter than the others, more present somehow in its pinprick of light against the vast darkness. It might be a planet rather than a star, Venus or Mars, traveling their ancient orbits around the same sun that warms the earth during daylight hours. Or it might simply be a star that happens to be perfectly positioned to catch and hold my attention at this moment when my consciousness is soft and receptive to such small miracles. I watch this bright point of light until my eyes begin to water, until it seems to pulse with its own rhythm, until it becomes not just an object in the sky, but a focal point for all the gentle attention that is moving through me as I lie here in the silver-barred darkness. It becomes a meditation object, like the falling water at the spring or the rising steam from the pool. Something to rest my awareness on while deeper processes of healing and renewal continue their patient work. The star seems to grow brighter as I watch, or perhaps my eyes are simply adjusting to the darkness, learning to see with the different vision that becomes possible when artificial lights are extinguished and consciousness settles into the slower rhythms of night. This different vision sees not just surfaces but depths, not just objects but the spaces between objects, not just light but the darkness that gives light meaning. With this night vision, the familiar objects in my room, the wooden chest where I keep my few possessions, the shelf where my dishes sit waiting for morning, the hearth where embers glow like sleeping eyes, become more themselves somehow, more present, more alive with their own quiet being. They are not just useful things, but companions, fellow inhabitants of this small space, participants in the larger community that includes mice and spiders, moonlight and shadows, the wind that moves between us all. My thoughts continue to soften and drift, losing their daytime insistence on logic and sequence and purpose. Instead, they move like water finding its way down a hillside, following the natural contours of consciousness, pooling in some places, flowing quickly through others, always seeking the path of least resistance toward the deeper rest that awaits in sleep. One thought flows into another without clear boundaries. The bright star becomes the silver line of water falling into the spring. The spring becomes the pool where I dissolved into heated water. The pool becomes this bed where I am dissolving into sleep. Sleep becomes another form of water, another way of flowing toward something essential and nourishing and restorative. The moon has moved far enough across the sky that its light now enters through different gaps in the roof, creating new patterns of illumination and shadow in my small room. What was bright is now dark. What was hidden is now revealed. The silver bars that crossed my blanket have shifted to cross the stone wall beside my bed, creating the illusion that the wall itself is made of alternating strips of light and darkness woven together like fabric. This constant shifting of the light reminds me that nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanent. Everything is always in motion, even when it appears to be still. The house that seems so solid is actually breathing with the wind. The earth that feels so stable is actually spinning through space at speeds that would terrify me if I allowed myself to think about them directly. The moon that appears to be moving across the sky is actually standing still while the earth turns beneath it. But these thoughts of cosmic motion and universal impermanence do not disturb my growing peace. Instead, they seem to support it, to remind me that letting go is the most natural thing in the world. That surrender is not defeat, but participation in the larger dance of existence that includes the orbit of planets and the circulation of blood and the gentle transition from waking to sleeping. My body has found its perfect position on the narrow mattress, a position that requires no adjustment, no small shifts to relieve pressure or find comfort. Every joint is aligned, every muscle is supported, every organ is free to perform its quiet work without interference from tension or holding. I am arranged like a sculpture carved from warm stone, like a figure designed to demonstrate the perfect peace that becomes possible when nothing needs to be different than it is. The warmth from the pool has settled into my bones now, becoming part of their structure rather than something added to them. It will stay with me through the night, maintaining the perfect climate of comfort that allows for the deepest forms of rest. But more than physical warmth, it is the warmth of being completely accepted, completely held, completely safe to let go of all the small vigilances that guard me during waking hours. Through the various gaps in the roof, I can see that clouds are beginning to gather around the moon. Not thick enough to block its light completely, but enough to soften it, to create a luminous halo that makes the whole sky glow with gentle radiance. This softer light transforms the harsh silver bars across my room into something more like moonbeams in a fairy tale, more like the visual representation of blessing or benediction. The approaching clouds suggest that snow might fall before morning, might cover the village and the hills and the path to the spring with a blanket of white that will muffle all sounds and transform the familiar landscape into something magical and strange. The thought of waking to a snow-covered world brings not anxiety about difficult travel or extra work, but anticipation of beauty, of the particular peace that comes when the world is simplified and purified by winter weather. But that is tomorrow's gift, tomorrow's small miracle. Tonight's gift is this moment of perfect comfort, this sense of being exactly where I need to be, exactly as warm as I need to be, exactly as safe as I need to be. Tonight's miracle is the way the moon continues to shine through the gaps in my roof, while my body settles deeper into sleep and my consciousness prepares for the journey into dreams. The wind outside has calmed to a gentle whisper, no longer rattling the wooden slats, but simply flowing over and around the house. like water around a stone in a stream. This softer wind brings with it the scent of snow, confirming my intuition that the world will be transformed by morning. But it also brings the scent of wood smoke from other houses in village, reminding me that I am not alone in this winter night, that other fires burn in other hearths, that other people are settling into their own forms of evening peace. This sense of community, of being part of a village full of people who are also lying in their beds, also watching moonlight move across their walls, also feeling the gradual transition from day consciousness to night consciousness, adds another layer to my contentment. I am held not just by my own bed and house, but by the larger web of human connection that includes all the families sleeping within the circle of thatched roofs, all the lives that intersect with mine in the daily business of a small community. Some of those lives intersect more closely than others. The woman who lives next door, whose own roof probably leaks moonlight through its own pattern of gaps and spaces. The old man who tends the village well, who might be lying awake thinking about the spring that feeds it, about the endless circulation of water that connects his daily work to the cosmic processes that drive weather and seasons and the patient formation of stone. But even the lives that barely touch mine are part of this web of connection that holds me as I prepare for sleep. The children who will wake in the morning to discover snow, who will see their familiar world transformed into a playground of white hills and silver trees. The mothers who will bundle them in wool and send them out to play, while keeping careful watch from windows and doorways. All of these lives are part of the larger story that includes my own small chapter. The story of people learning to live with weather and seasons, with the rhythms of earth and sky, with the daily miracles of fire and water, and the food that grows from soil and sunshine. Tonight, as I lie in my narrow bed, watching moonlight move across stone walls, I am both the teller and the told, both the observer and the observed, both separate and connected. The moon has climbed high enough now that its light enters my room at a steep angle, creating shorter bars of silver that move more quickly across the surfaces they touch. Soon it will be directly overhead, shining down through the gaps in the roof like spotlights, illuminating a stage where the only performance is a woman settling into sleep after a day of walking through fog and soaking in heated pools, and discovering that peace is always available to those who know how to find it. But even as the moon approaches its zenith, I can feel sleep approaching mine, not as an interruption of consciousness, but as its natural evolution, as the next phase in the daily cycle. That includes waking and walking and working and resting, and the deeper rest that comes when the boundary between self and world dissolves entirely. My breathing has slowed to match the rhythm of this approaching dissolution. Each inhalation brings in air that tastes of moonlight and possibility. Each exhalation releases another small piece of the daytime self that works and worries and makes decisions and carries responsibility. What remains is something simpler, more essential, more connected to the basic rhythms that govern all life. The last thing I see clearly before sleep claims me is a single bar of moonlight that has found its way to the exact center of my blanket. creating a silver stripe that runs from my feet to my chest, like a river of light flowing across the landscape of my resting body. This river connects me to the moon above, to the gaps in the roof that frame my view of infinity, to the ancient dialogue between earth and sky that includes my own small breathing as one note in an endless symphony. As consciousness fades into the deeper mysteries of sleep, I carry with me the warmth of the pool, the memory of falling water, the sense of being held by forces larger and more reliable than my own small will. I carry the knowledge that tomorrow there will be new paths to walk, new forms of peace to discover, new ways to participate in the endless conversation between human need and the earth's patient generosity. But for now, there is only this moment of perfect letting go, this surrender to the silver river of moonlight that flows through the gaps in my roof and carries me gently downstream toward the country of dreams, toward the deeper rest that makes all other rest possible, toward the source from which I will emerge tomorrow, renewed and ready for whatever gifts the day may bring. The moon continues its ancient journey across the sky, but I am no longer watching. Sleep has claimed me as gently as the pool claimed me, as naturally as water flows toward water, as inevitably as all things return to the source from which they came. In this return, I find not ending but beginning, not loss but discovery, not separation but the deepest possible connection to everything that lives and breathes and finds its own way home through the silver-barred darkness of a winter night. My hands wake before the rest of me. They move beneath the wool blanket like small animals emerging from hibernation, fingers stretching and curling, palms pressing against the warmth of my own body. I am still more asleep than awake, still floating in the space between dreams and consciousness, but my hands are already beginning their gentle exploration of the world that exists beneath the covers. The wool is soft against my fingertips, worn smooth by years of washing and use. It carries the scent of the herbs I store with it, lavender and rosemary, chamomile and mint, dried flowers and leaves that release their fragrance when warmed by sleeping bodies. My fingers trace the weave of the fabric, feeling the way individual threads cross and interlock to create something stronger than any single strand could be alone. This tracing is not purposeful, not directed toward any goal except the simple pleasure of touch. My hands move with the randomness of clouds across sky, following whatever path feels most inviting, most rewarding to the nerve endings that are slowly awakening along with the rest of my senses. Beneath the blanket, my shift has twisted during the night, the soft linen bunching around my waist, riding up to expose my legs to the warmth that still radiates from my core. My hands find this exposed skin and rest there, palms flat against thighs that are still heated from yesterday's time in the pool. The contrast between the coolness of my hands and the warmth of my legs creates a small shock of sensation that spreads upward through my torso like ripples on water. I am still not fully awake, still moving in the dreamlike state where touch becomes a form of listening, where my hands gather information about the world through contact rather than sight or sound. They tell me that I am warm, that I am rested, that my body has spent the night healing itself. In ways both subtle and profound, the healing began yesterday at the spring, continued in the depths of the heated pool, deepened during the night as I lay watching moonlight move across stone walls. Now, in the grey hour before dawn, it reveals itself through the responsiveness of skin to touch, through the way my muscles move without stiffness, through the quality of presence that fills my body like water filling a vessel. My hands drift upward, fingertips brushing against the soft fabric of my shift, where it clings to my ribs, my breasts, the hollow at the base of my throat. The linen is thin enough that I can feel the warmth of my skin through it, thin enough that touch becomes an ambiguous experience. Am I touching cloth or flesh? Where does the boundary lie between self and covering, between the body and what protects it? This ambiguity is pleasant rather than confusing. It mirrors the larger ambiguity of morning consciousness, where the boundary between sleeping and waking is equally uncertain, equally permeable. I exist in multiple states simultaneously, warm and cool, covered and exposed, asleep and awake, separate and connected. The grey light filtering through the gaps in the roof tells me that dawn is approaching, but it is still the uncertain light of early morning, too dim to see clearly, too bright to ignore completely. This half-light creates the perfect conditions for the kind of awareness that comes through touch rather than vision, for the exploration that happens when fingers become eyes and skin becomes a map of territories, both familiar and endlessly surprising. My hands know this body in ways my mind does not. They know the exact curve of my shoulder, the precise texture of skin along my collarbone, the specific way my ribs flare out from the center of my chest. They know which places are always cold, and which places hold warmth, which areas are sensitive to the lightest touch, and which require firmer pressure to register sensation. This knowledge has been accumulated over years of unconscious contact, hands moving during sleep, during the daily routines of washing and dressing, during the moments of absent-minded self-touch that happen when the mind is occupied with other concerns. It is a knowledge deeper than thought, more reliable than memory, as automatic as breathing. But this morning, as I lie in the wool-scented warmth of my narrow bed, this unconscious knowledge becomes conscious pleasure. Each familiar contour feels newly discovered. Each texture reveals depths of sensation I had not noticed before. It is as if the warmth from the pool has not only relaxed my muscles, but has also awakened my nerve endings, made them more receptive, more alive to the subtle communications that travel between skin and fingers. I think of the other hands that have moved across this body over the years. My mother's hands, washing me as a child, her touch gentle but efficient, motivated by care rather than pleasure. The hands of the village healer, searching for sources of pain or inflammation, her touch diagnostic, professional, aimed at understanding rather than enjoying. And other hands, belonging to people whose faces I sometimes struggle to remember, but whose touch remains vivid in my body's memory. hands that moved with desire as well as tenderness, that explored not just for the pleasure of the one being touched, but for the joy of the one doing the touching. These memories exist not in my mind, but in my flesh, stored in the places where other fingers once lingered, where other palms once pressed, where other people learnt the geography of my body through patient exploration. The memories are incomplete, faces fade, voices become unclear. The circumstances that brought those hands to my skin blur into impressions rather than clear recollections. But the touch remains. My body remembers being held, being caressed, being known through contact that communicated what words could not express. These memories surface now as my own hands move across familiar territory, awakening not just present sensation, but the echo of all the sensation this skin has ever received. The touch of hands is different from any other form of contact. Cloth touches the surface. Air touches with temperature and movement. Water touches with pressure and flow. But hands touch with intention, with consciousness, with the peculiar intimacy that comes from one aware being reaching out to make contact with another. Even when the hands are my own, touching my own body, this intimacy remains. My right hand touching my left arm creates a circuit of sensation that flows both ways. The hand feels the softness of skin. The arm feels the warmth of palm and fingers. Both sides of the contact are alive. Both are conscious. Both participate in the exchange of information and pleasure. This two-way flow of sensation creates a kind of internal dialogue, a conversation conducted entirely through touch. My hands ask questions. What is the texture here? What is the temperature there? How does this respond to pressure? How does that respond to lightness? And my skin answers with sensations that have no names but carry meaning more direct than language. The conversation moves slowly, without urgency. There is nowhere I need to be this morning, nothing that requires my immediate attention. The village is still sleeping. The sun is still below the horizon. The day has not yet begun to make its demands. I exist in a pocket of time that belongs entirely to me, that I can fill with whatever brings pleasure or peace or simple awareness. My hands drift lower, following the line of my ribs down to where they curve inward toward my waist. The shift has bunched here, creating folds and wrinkles that my fingers smooth automatically, not from vanity but from the simple desire for contact with skin rather than fabric. The linen slides across my torso like water, settling into new configurations that follow the contours of my resting body. Where the fabric pulls away, cool air touches skin that has been covered and warm all night. This sudden coolness creates a heightened awareness, a sense of vulnerability that is not unpleasant but rather exciting. Like the first shock of stepping into the pool before the heat becomes comfortable. My hands follow the edge of sensation created by this contrast between warm skin and cool air. They trace the boundary like cartographers mapping a new territory, fingers lingering where the air touches most directly, palms covering areas that want to remain warm. This creates a constantly shifting pattern of exposure and coverage, warmth and coolness, known and unknown. The game of warm and cool becomes a form of meditation, a way of being present to the simple fact of having a body, of existing as a conscious creature made of flesh and bone and nerve endings that respond to the slightest stimulus. It requires no skill, no knowledge, no purpose beyond the pleasure of sensation itself. But as my hands continue their exploration, purpose begins to emerge naturally, organically, like flowers growing from soil that has been properly prepared. The random touching becomes more focused, more intentional, more directed toward areas that respond with particular warmth, particular aliveness, particular invitation for deeper contact. My hands know these areas without being told. They know the places where touch creates not just sensation, but a kind of luminous awareness that spreads from the point of contact through the entire body. They know how to find these places, how to approach them with the right combination of gentleness and intention, how to awaken them without overwhelming them. This knowledge, like the knowledge of my body's geography, has been accumulated gradually, unconsciously, through years of accidental discovery and deliberate exploration. It is knowledge that belongs to the body rather than the mind, that cannot be learned from books or instruction, but only from patient attention to what brings pleasure, what creates connection, what transforms simple touch into something approaching transcendence. The transcendence begins as warmth, not the warmth of temperature, but the warmth of awakening life, of circulation increasing, of energy moving through pathways that are usually dormant. It spreads from wherever my hands are touching to places they are not touching, creating a network of sensation that includes the entire body. This warmth is similar to the warmth I felt in the pool, more internal, more generated from within rather than received from without. It is the warmth of a body awakening to its own capacity for pleasure, its own ability to create the conditions for its own healing and renewal. My breathing changes as this warmth spreads, becoming deeper, more intentional, more synchronized with the movement of my hands. Each inhalation draws in air that seems to feed the growing heat. Each exhalation releases tension and holding that might interfere with the natural flow of sensation through flesh and nerve and blood. The rhythm of breathing and touching creates its own trance-like state, similar to the state I experienced beside the spring, in the depths of the pool, lying beneath the moon-barred darkness. But this trance is more active, more participatory, requiring the conscious cooperation of hands and breath, and the willing surrender of the mind to the wisdom of the body. In this state, thoughts become subsidiary to sensation. Observation becomes more important than analysis. Being becomes more significant than doing. I exist primarily as a collection of nerve endings responding to touch, as a network of sensation extending through flesh, as a conscious awareness resting in the pleasure of embodied existence. The pleasure is both simple and complex. Simple because it requires nothing more than touch, nothing more than the willingness to pay attention to what the body is already feeling. Complex because it opens into layers of sensation that seem to have no bottom. Depths of feeling that connect the immediate experience of fingertips on skin to larger mysteries of aliveness. Connection, the particular joy that comes from being fully present in one's own body. This joy is not dependent on any external circumstance, not contingent on any particular outcome. It arises naturally from the simple fact of being alive, of having nerve endings and circulation and the capacity to feel pleasure in response to appropriate touch. It is a joy that belongs to the body itself, that emerges when conditions are right for the body to remember its own inherent capacity for happiness. The conditions this morning are perfect. The warmth from yesterday's pool still glows in my bones. The peace from watching moonlight still softens the edges of awareness. The safety of my small room creates the perfect container for exploration without self-consciousness or hurry. My hands know how to take advantage of these perfect conditions. They know when to move slowly and when to pause completely, when to increase pressure and when to barely touch at all, when to cover large areas and when to focus on specific points that seem to concentrate sensation like lenses focusing light. This knowledge guides my hands without my conscious direction, allows them to move with an intelligence that seems to come from the body itself, rather than from any decision made by the thinking mind. It is as if my hands have their own awareness, their own wisdom about how to create the conditions for the deepest forms of bodily pleasure and healing. The healing aspect of this touching is as important as the pleasure, though the two are not separate but intertwined like threads in a weaving. Each point of contact that creates pleasure also creates healing. Not healing of any specific ailment, but the more general healing that comes from being completely present in one's own body, completely accepting of one's own flesh, completely willing to receive the gifts that embodied existence offers. This healing pleasure spreads through me like the warmth from the pool, but more gradually, more subtly, more intimately connected to my own participation in creating it. It reaches places that external heat cannot reach, dissolves tensions that external relaxation cannot address, creates a sense of wholeness that includes not just the physical body, but the entire field of consciousness that extends through and around it. My shift has worked its way up further during this exploration, bunching around my ribs, leaving most of my torso exposed to the warm air beneath the blanket. My hands follow this exposure, palms pressing against skin that seems to glow with its own heat, fingers tracing patterns that have no specific design, but follow the natural contours and curves that make up the landscape of embodied existence. The skin responds to this touch with a kind of luminescence, not visible to the eyes, but felt as a quality of aliveness that seems to increase wherever hands linger, wherever attention focuses, wherever the conscious mind and the sensory body collaborate in the creation of pleasure. This luminescence spreads like ripples on water, each point of touch, creating expanding circles of sensation that intersect and interfere with each other to create complex patterns of feeling that shift and change moment by moment. The overall effect is of being lit from within, of existing as a conscious flame inhabiting flesh, of being both the candle and the light it creates. The grey light outside has grown slightly brighter, suggesting that dawn is approaching more quickly than I realized. But time seems irrelevant in this state of focused attention, this trance of touching and being touched by my own hands. Minutes could be hours, or hours could be minutes. The only time that matters is the time of sensation itself, measured not by clocks, but by the rhythm of breath and pulse, and the slow building of warmth and pleasure and healing. My breathing has become part of the touching now, each inhalation drawing sensation deeper into the body, each exhalation spreading it further through flesh and nerve, and the subtle channels that carry pleasure, like streams carrying water through a landscape. This integration of breath and touch creates a feedback loop that amplifies both. The touching becomes more sensitive because the breathing provides more oxygen to heighten awareness. The breathing becomes more pleasurable because the touching creates sensations that make each breath feel like a gift, like air that carries not just life but joy, not just oxygen but some more essential nourishment that feeds the soul as well as the cells. My hands have found their way to the places that respond most readily to this kind of attention. The areas where nerve endings gather like flowers in a meadow, where touch creates not just local sensation but full body responses that seem to originate everywhere and nowhere at once. These places have their own intelligence, their own way of communicating what they need, what they want, what brings them most alive. They speak through sensation rather than words, through the language of pleasure and warmth, and the particular quality of aliveness that increases when they receive the right kind of attention. My hands listen to this language with the patience of someone who has learned that the body's wisdom emerges slowly, gradually, like dawn, breaking over hills shrouded in mist. They do not hurry or force or demand immediate response, but instead create the conditions where response can arise naturally, organically, in its own time and in its own way. The conditions are perfect this morning. The warmth from the pool, the peace from the moonlight, the safety of my small room, the luxury of time. Without external demands, all of these create a container within which the body can remember its capacity for pleasure, its birthright of sensation, its inherent ability to generate healing through appropriate of touch. The healing continues to spread through me like slow fire, warming places that have been cold, awakening areas that have been dormant, creating connections between parts of my body that usually exist in isolation from each other. My hands on my skin become a bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious wisdom of flesh, between intention and instinct, between what I think I want and what my body actually needs. What my body needs, I discover, is this particular quality of attention, not sexual in the narrow sense, but sensual in the deepest sense, honoring the full spectrum of feeling that becomes possible when consciousness and flesh collaborate without shame, without hurry, without any agenda beyond the simple desire to feel fully alive in this moment. The aliveness spreads through me in waves now, each wave bringing deeper relaxation, deeper pleasure, deeper connection to the miracle of existing as a conscious being inhabiting a body that knows how to create its own happiness when conditions are right. The waves have their own rhythm, their own tide-like quality of building and receding. Building and receding, each cycle bringing me deeper into the experience, deeper into the trance-like state, where ordinary awareness gives way to something more fundamental, more connected to the basic processes of life itself. In this state, the boundary between self and sensation becomes permeable. I am not a person experiencing pleasure, but pleasure experiencing itself through the medium of flesh and nerve and conscious attention. I am not separate from the waves of feeling, but am the waves themselves, existing as pure sensation, organized temporarily into the form of a woman lying in a narrow bed in the gray hour before dawn. This dissolution is not frightening, but liberating. Not a loss of self, but a discovery of what self actually is beneath all the stories and roles and identities that usually define existence. Beneath the woman who tends fires and weaves cloth and walks paths through fog, there is this pure awareness experiencing itself through the specific configuration of nerve endings and circulation and responsiveness that makes up a living body. The discovery comes not through thinking but through feeling, not through analysis but through surrender to the wisdom that emerges when the body is allowed to guide its own experience without interference from the mind's habits of control and judgment and premature conclusion. My hands continue their exploration, but now they seem to move themselves, guided by an intelligence that includes my conscious intention, but extends far beyond it to include the body's own knowledge of what brings healing, what creates connection, what opens the doorways to the deeper forms of pleasure that nourish not just the flesh, but the spirit that animates it. This intelligence guides my hands to places I might not have thought to touch, to rhythms I might not have consciously chosen, to combinations of pressure and gentleness that create responses I could not have predicted, but that feel absolutely right once they begin to unfold. The unfolding has its own organic pace, its own natural progression from gentle awakening to deeper arousal to the building intensity that seems to gather sensation from every part of my body and concentrate it into streams of liquid fire that flow through flesh like light through crystal. The fire is warm rather than hot, illuminating rather than consuming, healing rather than destructive. It burns away not flesh, but the accumulated tensions and holdings and small armors that separate me from full presence in my own body. As these barriers dissolve, sensation becomes more vivid, pleasure becomes more intense. The connection between touch and response becomes more immediate and more profound. My breathing has deepened into a rhythm that seems to come from the earth itself, from the same deep places that heed the pools and springs, from the same ancient sources that drive the circulation of air and water and the patient turning of seasons. Each breath draws in not just air, but life force, the fundamental energy that animates all existence. This life force moves through my body like a river, pooling in some places, flowing quickly through others, creating currents and eddies and moments of stillness that all contribute to the overall circulation of aliveness that includes breath and pulse and the movement of hands across skin that has become luminous with sensitivity. The luminosity is not metaphorical, but felt as a quality of presence that seems to glow through flesh, that makes every point of contact between hand and skin feel like a small sun, a concentration of the same energy that drives the burning of stars and the growth of flowers and the patient work of water wearing channels through stone. My body has become a landscape of such suns, a constellation of points, where touch creates not just sensation, but illumination, not just pleasure, but a form of knowledge that cannot be expressed in words, but can only be experienced through the complete surrender of conscious control to the body's own wisdom about how to generate healing and joy. The joy builds in waves, now, each wave higher than the last, each cycle of building and releasing, carrying me deeper into the experience and closer to some kind of culmination that I can sense approaching like dawn, like spring, like the moment when water heated slowly finally begins to boil. But this approaching culmination is not a goal to be reached, but a gift to be received. Not something I am making happen, but something that is happening through me. Not an achievement of will, but a blessing that emerges when conditions are right and resistance is absent, and the body is allowed to follow its own instincts toward wholeness. The instincts are ancient, older than thought, older than language, older than the particular culture and time that have shaped the surface of my life. They connect me to every woman who has ever lain in bed and discovered the healing power of self-touch. Every person who has ever found in their own body a source of pleasure and peace that asks nothing from the external world, but only the willingness to receive what is already present, already waiting, already available. This availability is one of the great secrets, one of the gifts that culture often obscures, but that the body remembers even when the mind forgets. The secret that pleasure is not something that must be earned or achieved or granted by others, but something that arises naturally from the simple fact of being alive, of having nerve endings and circulation and the capacity to feel. The capacity reveals itself fully now as the waves of sensation build toward their natural culmination, as the slow fire that has been spreading through my body gathers itself into a more focused intensity, as the pleasure that began with simple touching transforms into something approaching ecstasy. The ecstasy is both physical and beyond the physical, both located in specific places in my body and somehow diffused through the entire field of awareness that extends through and around flesh. It is the ecstasy of complete presence, of total acceptance, of the momentary dissolution of all the boundaries that usually separate self from sensation, mind from body, individual consciousness from the larger life that moves through all things. In this dissolution, I touch not just my own skin, but the source from which all skin arises. Not just my own pleasure, but the fundamental joy that underlies all existence. Not just my own body, but the body of the world itself, pulsing with the same life, responding to the same touch, participating in the same dance of consciousness and flesh and the endless. Creativity that manifests as sensation, as pleasure, as the particular form of healing that comes through complete acceptance of embodied existence. The culmination, when it comes, arrives like sunrise, gradually, then suddenly, then gradually again. It spreads through my body like light spreading across a landscape, illuminating places that have been in shadow, warming areas that have been cold, creating for a few timeless moments a state of being that includes no separation between the one who touches and the one being touched, between pleasure and the consciousness that experiences pleasure, between my individual body and the larger body of life itself. In this state, I am both completely myself and completely dissolved into something larger. I am the woman lying in the narrow bed, and I am also the bed, the room, the house, the village, the hills that surround the village, the sky that arches over the hills, the space that contains the sky. I am individual and universal, simultaneously, separate and connected at the same time. The state lasts for moments or hours. There is no way to measure time when ordinary consciousness has dissolved into pure sensation, pure being, pure presence. But gradually, inevitably, the intensity begins to fade. The dissolution begins to reverse itself. The boundaries that define individual existence begin to reform. But they reform differently than before, more lightly, more flexibly, with the knowledge that they are not permanent walls, but temporary arrangements. Not absolute separations, but convenient fictions that allow consciousness to organize itself into the form of a particular person, living a particular life in a particular place and time. This knowledge changes everything about how I exist in my own body. The flesh that felt sometimes like a prison now feels like a palace, a magnificent dwelling place for consciousness to inhabit. The skin that sometimes felt like a barrier now feels like a membrane that allows exchange, connection, the constant flow of energy and information between self and world. My hands continue to move across this transformed flesh, but now the movement is more like blessing than exploration, more like gratitude than searching. They trace the contours of a body that has just revealed its capacity for transcendence, its ability to generate healing and joy through its own inner resources, its birthright of pleasure that requires nothing more than appropriate attention and the willingness to receive what is already present. The grey light outside has grown brighter while I have been lost in this exploration, this discovery, this remembering of what the body knows about creating its own happiness. Dawn is approaching, and with it the return to the everyday world of tasks and voices and 1,000 small demands that make up ordinary life. But I am not the same person who will meet those demands as I was yesterday. Something fundamental has shifted during this morning hour of self-discovery. Something that will inform every activity, every interaction, every moment of the day that is about to begin. The shift is not dramatic, but profound. like the shift that happens when winter finally gives way to spring, subtle at first, then increasingly evident in everything, from the quality of light to the way air moves, to the responsiveness of earth to warmth and water. I have remembered something essential about what it means to inhabit a body, to exist as consciousness embedded in flesh, to live as a being, capable of generating healing and pleasure and connection through the simple willingness to pay attention to what is already present, already available, already waiting for the right kind of touch to awaken it. This remembering will stay with me as I rise from bed and dress and begin the day's activities. It will inform the way I move through space, the way I interact with others, the way I approach the inevitable challenges and sorrows that are part of any human life. It will remind me that beneath whatever difficulties arise, there is always this resource, this capacity for healing and joy that belongs to the body itself, that cannot be taken away by external circumstances, but only forgotten temporarily and then remembered again. The remembering is complete now, at least for this morning, this particular exploration, this specific discovery of what becomes possible when hands and skin and conscious attention collaborate in the creation of healing through pleasure, connection through touch, transcendence through the complete acceptance of embodied existence. My hands rest now against skin that glows with warmth and satisfaction, against flesh that has just demonstrated its capacity for generating its own forms of blessing. The touching has become simply resting. The exploration has become simple presence. The active creation of pleasure has given way to the passive enjoyment of its lingering effects. These effects will fade gradually as the day progresses, as the demands of ordinary life reassert themselves, as the extraordinary consciousness of the morning gives way to the more practical awareness needed for work and interaction and the navigation of familiar routines. But something will remain, a quality of presence, a depth of connection to my own body, a knowledge of resources that exist within reach whenever I need them. This knowledge is a gift I give to myself, a form of self-care that requires no external validation, no permission from others, no resources beyond the willingness to create time and space for the body to remember what it knows about healing itself. The gift will inform everything I do today, every person I encounter, every task I undertake, not because I will think about this morning's experience, but because the body remembers differently than the mind does, because the nervous system holds the memory of pleasure and healing in ways that influence all subsequent experience, because consciousness that has touched its own capacity for transcendence carries that knowledge in every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of embodied existence. This is how the morning ends and the day begins, not with separation between pleasure and ordinary life, but with integration, not with compartmentalization, but with wholeness, not with a sense that I must choose between spiritual practice and physical pleasure, but with the recognition that they are aspects of the same fundamental commitment to being fully alive, fully present, fully accepting of the gift of consciousness inhabiting flesh. The gift is complete now, received and integrated and ready to be lived. My hands rest quietly against skin that has been blessed by appropriate touch. Skin that has remembered its capacity for generating healing and joy. The gray light outside continues to brighten toward full dawn, toward the beginning of another day in the endless sequence of days that make up a human life. But this day will be different because of this morning, because of this remembering, because of the particular form of blessing that comes through the hands. Patient attention to flesh that knows how to respond with pleasure, with healing, with the profound peace that emerges when the body is allowed to guide its own experience of what it means to be alive. I am ready now to rise, to dress, to meet whatever the day may bring. But I carry with me the memory of this exploration, this discovery, this gift of remembered wholeness. I carry it in my skin, in my circulation, in the quality of presence that fills my body like warm water filling a vessel. This memory will sustain me through whatever challenges may arise, whatever sorrows may need bearing, whatever joys may come to be celebrated. It will remind me that beneath all the surface activities of life, there is always this deeper resource, this capacity for healing and pleasure and connection that belongs to embodied existence itself. The morning's gift is complete. The day's journey is about to begin. The blanket pulls itself around me like arms made of memory. I drift in the space between waking and sleeping, where thoughts move like smoke and time becomes circular rather than linear. The wool that covers me carries the warmth of sheep that grazed on hills I will never see. The work of hands that spun fiber into thread, thread into cloth, cloth into this covering that has become so familiar it feels like an extension of my own skin. My body has settled into the mattress completely now, finding its perfect arrangement among the straw and rough-woven fabric. Every joint rests at its natural angle. Every muscle releases into gravity. Every organ settles into the rhythm of deep rest. I am arranged like stones worn smooth by water, like driftwood polished by waves, like anything that has found its ideal position in the world and asks for nothing more than the chance to remain there. The warmth from the morning's touching still glows in my flesh, mixed now with the warmth from yesterday's pool, from the moonlight that blessed me during the night, from all the forms of healing that have accumulated in my body like honey gathering in cells. This warmth is not just physical, but somehow more essential. The warmth of being completely at home in my own skin, completely accepting of the gift of embodied existence. Outside, the wind has returned, but it is a different wind than yesterday's cold breath that drove me toward the spring. This wind is softer, warmer, carrying hints of the spring that still lies months in the future, but that already exists as possibility, as promise, as the inevitability that follows winter with the same patience that dawn follows night. The wind finds the gaps in my roof and flows through them like water through stone, bringing with it the scent of distant places, not the sharp metallic scent of snow, but something greener, more alive. The scent of sap beginning to move in dormant trees, of earth preparing to soften beneath the frozen surface, of life gathering itself for the great awakening. That comes when winter finally releases its hold on the world. But that awakening is still distant, still a whispered promise rather than an imminent reality. For now, there is only this deep winter night, this perfect darkness, this cocoon of wool and warmth, and a particular peace that comes when the body has been thoroughly blessed by appropriate touch, appropriate heat, appropriate rest. Pull the blanket closer, and it responds like a living thing, molding itself to the contours of my body, creating perfect warmth without weight, perfect coverage without constriction. The wool has been my companion through many winters, has learned the shape of my sleeping form, has absorbed the oils from my skin and the scent of the herbs I store with it, until it carries something of my essence, something that makes it uniquely mine. This intimate relationship between body and covering is one of the small miracles of daily life. So ordinary it usually passes unnoticed, but so essential that its absence would be immediately felt. The blanket does not just provide warmth, but creates a boundary, a sense of containment that allows consciousness to gather itself inward, to move away from the vast openness of the world, toward the intimate territory of dreams and deep rest. Within this woolen boundary, I exist in perfect safety. Nothing can reach me here that I do not invite. Nothing can disturb the deep settling that has been building since yesterday morning, when I first stepped onto the path through the fog. The village sleeps around me, other bodies wrapped in their own blankets, other consciousness making their own journeys toward renewal and rest. The sense of being part of this larger rhythm of sleeping and waking adds another layer to my contentment. I am not alone in this surrender to rest, not isolated in my need for the healing that comes through darkness and dreams. All around me, people are making the same daily pilgrimage from waking consciousness to sleeping restoration. All of us trusting in the same ancient process that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, that allows the body to repair what the day has worn, that returns the spirit to its source. My breathing has slowed to match this collective rhythm, this village-wide exhalation into sleep. Each breath carries me deeper into the soft darkness, further from the concerns of daylight, closer to the source of dreams. The air I breathe has been warmed by its passage through the wall, filtered through fibers that catch and hold any harshness, any chill, any quality that might disturb the perfect conditions for deep rest. This filtered air tastes of home, of safety, of the particular comfort that comes from being exactly where I belong. It feeds not just my lungs, but something deeper, the part of me that needs to feel held, contained, perfectly supported in the vulnerable act of letting go completely. The letting go happens gradually, layer by layer, like removing clothes after a long day. First, the small tensions that still cling to my shoulders, my jaw, the muscles around my eyes. These dissolve into the warmth of the wool, melting like frost in morning sunlight. Then, the larger holdings, the posture that maintains my sense of being a separate person moving through space, the boundaries that define where my body ends and the world begins. As these boundaries soften, I begin to merge with my surroundings in the way that only happens at the threshold of sleep. The wool becomes not something I am wrapped in, but something I am part of. The mattress becomes not something I am lying on, but something I am sinking into, becoming one with. The small room becomes not a space I occupy, but a larger version of my own body, breathing with the same rhythm, pulsing with the same life. This merging is not frightening, but deeply comforting, like a child melting into a mother's embrace, like water returning to water, like anything finding its way back to the source from which it came. It represents not a loss of self, but a return to a more fundamental version of self. The self that exists before individual identity crystallizes, after it dissolves in the spaces between breaths where being is more basic than doing. The wind outside continues its soft conversation with the houses of the village, but the sound becomes part of the internal rhythm rather than an external disturbance. It is the wind of my own breathing, the circulation of air through a body that includes not just flesh and bone, but wool and straw and wooden walls, and thatched roofs, and the space between all these things that allows them to exist as separate objects while participating in the same dance of air and warmth, and the endless exchange between inside and outside. My consciousness drifts like smoke, sometimes condensing into specific thoughts or images, sometimes dispersing into pure awareness without content. When thoughts arise, they have the soft quality of thoughts that come at the edge of sleep, incomplete, dreamlike, more like whispered suggestions than actual ideas. I think of the spring, but now it seems like something from a dream. The silver line of falling water, more like memory than actual experience. I think of the pool, but the heated water has merged with the warmth that surrounds me now, making it impossible to tell where one sensation ends and another begins. I think of the moonlight, but it has become part of the soft darkness that holds me now, present not as illumination, but as a quality of presence that requires no light to be felt. These thoughts arise and dissolve without leaving traces, like bubbles surfacing in still water. They are part of the natural effervescence of a mind settling into rest. The gentle release of the day's experiences as they transform from active memory into the deeper storage. That happens during sleep. But beneath these surface thoughts, something deeper is occurring. The healing that began at the spring continued in the pool, deepened under the moonlight, and culminated in the morning's self-discovery, is integrating itself into the very structure of my being, not just into memory or understanding, but into the cellular level where real transformation takes place. This integration happens without my conscious participation, guided by the same intelligence that repairs damaged tissue, that maintains the balance of systems, that orchestrates the 1,000 processes that keep a body alive without any input from the thinking mind. It is the intelligence of healing itself, working through the perfect conditions created by deep rest, appropriate warmth, and the complete safety that allows the deepest forms of renewal to occur. The wool wraps more closely around me as I settle deeper into this healing sleep. It seems to know exactly what I need, exactly how to adjust itself to provide perfect warmth without overheating, perfect support without pressure, perfect coverage without weight. This responsiveness speaks to the long relationship between fiber and flesh, sheep and human, the ancient partnership that has kept our species warm through countless winters. But tonight the wool seems especially alive, especially responsive, as if it has absorbed something of the energy that has been moving through me since yesterday morning. It glows with its own warmth, pulses with its own life, breathes with the same rhythm that carries me deeper into the realm of dreams and restoration. The boundary between my body and the blanket continues to dissolve until I cannot tell where flesh ends and fiber begins. We have become a single organism, a unified field of warmth and consciousness, and the particular peace that comes when all needs are met, all safety is assured, all conditions are perfect for the deepest forms of healing and renewal. In this unified field, healing happens not as something I do, but as something I am. My entire being becomes a process of restoration, a living example of the body's infinite capacity to renew itself when conditions allow, when resistance is absent, when the consciousness that inhabits flesh trusts completely in the wisdom of organic processes that know how to repair, restore, and regenerate. The regeneration includes not just the physical body, but everything that consciousness touches: memory, emotion, the sense of connection to the larger world, the capacity for pleasure and joy, and the deep peace that underlies all other experiences. All of these are being renewed as I lie wrapped in wool that has become indistinguishable from my own warmth, my own breathing, my own patient movement toward the country of dreams. The movement is so gradual, it feels like geological time, like the slow formation of mountains, like the patient work of water wearing channels through stone. There is no hurry in this transition, no urgency, no sense that sleep is something to be achieved rather than something to be received. I drift like a leaf on still water, like smoke rising from a fire that has burned down to perfect coals, like anything that moves according to laws more fundamental than intention or will. The movement carries me through layers of consciousness, each one softer than the last, each one more removed from the ordinary concerns of waking life. In the deepest layer, there are no thoughts at all, only pure being, pure awareness resting in itself, without need for objects or experiences or any form of external stimulation. This is the consciousness that exists before birth, after death, in the spaces between heartbeats where life reveals its essential nature, as something more fundamental than any particular form it takes. But even this deepest layer is not the final destination. Beyond pure awareness lies something even more essential, the source from which awareness itself arises, the silence from which all sound emerges, the darkness from which all light is born. This source is not empty, but full, not absent, but intensely present, not nothing, but everything in its most concentrated form. It is the source of healing, the source of pleasure, the source of the particular peace that passes understanding, because it does not depend on any particular understanding to exist. As I approach this source, wrapped in wool that has become indistinguishable from the fundamental warmth that sustains all life, I feel the last traces of individual identity beginning to dissolve, not into ton consciousness, but into a form of consciousness so basic, so universal, that it includes everything while belonging to nothing in particular. This dissolution is not death, but its opposite, the discovery of life so fundamental that it survives the death of every particular form, so essential that it animates every temporary arrangement of matter and energy, so basic that it is the ground from which all individual existence emerges and to which it returns. In this dissolution, I am no longer a woman lying in a bed in a village surrounded by hills. I am the consciousness that animates women, beds, villages, hills, and the space that contains them all. I am the awareness in which all experiences arise, the silence in which all sounds occur, the darkness in which all light appears. But I am also, somehow, still myself, still the particular arrangement of memory and sensation and individual history that walked through fog yesterday morning, that soaked in heated pools, that watched moonlight move across stone walls, that discovered the healing power of appropriate such. These two truths, universal consciousness and individual identity, exist simultaneously without contradiction, like wave and ocean, like ray and sun, like note and silence. This paradox is resolved not through understanding, but through experience, through the direct knowing that comes when consciousness rests so deeply in itself that the apparent contradiction between individual and universal reveals itself as the fundamental creativity of existence itself, the way infinite potential organizes itself into temporary forms, while never losing its essential nature as infinite potential. The knowing comes not as information but as peace, not as content but as the contentless awareness that is the source of all content. It is the peace of coming home to what I have always been, but temporarily forgot, the joy of remembering what I have always known, but allowed to be obscured by the busyness of surface life. This peace is not separate from the wool that wraps me, the straw that supports me, the wind that breathes through the gaps in my roof. It is the essence of all these things, the consciousness that appears as matter while remaining eternally free of any particular material form. As this recognition deepens, the last traces of effort or seeking or any form of wanting dissolve into the perfect satisfaction of being exactly what I am, exactly where I am, exactly when I am. There is nowhere to go because I am already home. There is nothing to achieve because I already am what I was seeking. There is nothing to heal because wholeness is my essential nature, temporarily obscured, but never actually damaged. The obscuration lifts like fog before sunrise, not dramatically, but with the inevitability of natural processes unfolding according to their own inner timing. What is revealed is not something new, but something that has always been present, waiting for the right conditions, the right warmth, the right rest, the right quality of attention to recognize itself. The recognition is complete now, though it will fade as I return to waking consciousness, as the demands of ordinary life reassert themselves, as the particular challenges and joys of being human require my attention. But something essential will remain, the memory of what lies beneath all particular experiences, the knowledge of the source from which all healing emerges, the peace that is available in every moment for those who know how to rest deeply enough to find it. This knowledge is not something I can hold on to, but something I can return to. Not a possession, but a homecoming. Not an achievement, but a recognition of what has always been true. It lives in my body as much as in my mind, in the cells that remember perfect rest, in the nervous system that knows how to generate healing through appropriate conditions, in the breath that connects individual existence to the larger breathing of the cosmos. The breath continues, slow and deep and perfectly synchronized with the rise and fall of the wool blanket, the expansion and contraction of ribs that move without conscious direction, the circulation of air through a body that has become a shrine to the perfect peace that underlies all motion, all change, all the temporary arrangements of energy and matter that dance across the surface of eternal stillness. In this stillness, wrapped in wool that has become the arms of the universe itself, held by darkness that is more nurturing than any light, breathed by wind that carries the whispered promise of springs still months away, I rest in the deepest possible form of sleep, the sleep that is not unconsciousness, but consciousness resting in its own source, awareness. Be aware of itself as the space in which all experiences arise and dissolve. This is the sleep that heals not just the body, but the very sense of separation that creates the need for healing. This is the rest that restores not just energy, but the recognition of the infinite energy that is the source of all finite forms. This is the peace that surpasses understanding, because it is the understanding that surpasses all need for particular forms of peace. The wind whispers through the village, touching every roof, every wall, every sleeping form with the same blessing that touches me. We are all held in the same darkness, all wrapped in our own versions of woolen warmth, all making the same nightly journey toward the source of renewal that makes each new day possible. This shared journey connects me to every sleeper, every dreamer, every consciousness that trusts enough to let go of waking control and surrender to the deeper intelligence that operates through rest, through dreams, through the perfect vulnerability of sleep. We are all part of the same organism, all cells in the same body, all notes in the same song that the earth sings to itself as it turns through the star-filled darkness. The song includes the whisper of wind through gaps in roofs, the breathing of wool wrapped around warm bodies, the circulation of blood through vessels that know their way without maps. The slow regeneration of tissue that happens when consciousness steps aside and allows the body's wisdom to work without interference. All of these sounds weave together into the lullaby that carries me the final distance into the deepest rest, the most complete peace, the healing sleep that is not just the absence of waking, but the presence of something more fundamental than any particular state of consciousness. In this presence, wrapped in wool, that has become indistinguishable from the fundamental warmth that sustains all life, I dissolve completely into the source from which I will emerge tomorrow renewed, restored, ready for whatever gifts the new day may bring. But that emergence is still hours away, still separated from this moment by the perfect darkness that holds all possibility, all potential, all the healing that happens when consciousness rests so deeply in itself that the very need for healing dissolves into the recognition of what has always been whole. This wholeness is my true nature, the true nature of everyone and everything, temporarily obscured, but never actually damaged, always available for those who know how to create the conditions, the warmth, the safety, the perfect rest that allow it to recognize itself. The recognition is complete, the healing is whole. For sleep that surpasses sleep embraces me like arms made of starlight, like breath made of blessing, like wool woven from the very fabric of peace itself. In this embrace, there is nothing left to do but rest, nothing left to seek but this perfect finding, nothing left to heal but this complete wholeness that has always been present, waiting for exactly this moment, exactly this rest, exactly this perfect surrender to the woolen sleep that is the womb from which all awakening is born.